Well, I think people can develop these patterns of behavior that are destructive with anything, whether it's with alcohol or cannabis or,
Yes.
sex or anything. People get in ruts.
Yeah.
And, it doesn't mean that the cannabis is bad. It means that you are on a bad mental path.
Yes, exactly.
And I'm not encouraging it for everybody because some people it genuinely biologically doesn't jive with them.
Yeah. But the fundamental thing is we as adult human beings need to take responsibility for our own lives and our own decisions.
Yeah.
And we need not hand that responsibility over to governmental institutions, especially when it concerns something as intimate and personal as our consciousness. And my view is the ancient world had the right attitude to this kind of thing, and the modern world does not, and that we can sit down and learn a lot from the ancient world. A lot of people ask me, Hancock, you've been arguing that there's been a lost civilization in the human story, but what sort of civilization do you think it was? Well, one of the things I think is it was a civilization that used psychedelics. I think it was a civilization that emerged from shamanism, but did not stay at the hunter-gatherer stage, but that took the essence of shamanism and integrated it into a very different kind of civilization from our own, which pursued things in different ways. A lot of archaeologists have said to me, but we don't find any plastic bottles from the Ice Age. That means there was no advanced civilization during the Ice Age. Well, hang on. Maybe an advanced civilization might have decided never to get involved in plastic in the first place. Maybe there would have been a clear choice not to make plastic. Maybe they did things in completely different ways. Maybe they cultivated powers of the human mind that we dismiss and regard as completely unimportant. Woo-woo.
Yeah, this is the thoughts about Egypt, correct?
It's about Egypt and about other things. I mean, the specific example I give is above the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid are 5 further chambers. And these chambers are roofed and floored with granite beams that weigh about 70 tons each. And there are hundreds of them. And these 70-ton granite beams, which to put in context, a 70-ton beam is equivalent in weight to 35 large SUVs. These 70-ton granite beams have been elevated to a height of more than 350 feet above the ground and carefully and precisely placed in position. It is very hard for archaeologists to explain how that was done using purely leverage and mechanical advantage. You can say, perhaps they built a ramp and hauled the stones up the ramp. But then you have to confront basic laws of physics. You can't haul a stone weighing tens of tons up a slope that exceeds 10 degrees. Then you start doing the calculation. How long a ramp do I need with a 10-degree slope to get to 350 feet above the ground? And the answer is you need a fucking long ramp, which should still be there, because it couldn't have been a sand ramp. It would have collapsed under the weight of those stones. It had to be as massive as the pyramid itself. So this begins to seem like an absurd idea, the idea that is foisted on us by archaeology. Maybe the idea that they regard as absurd, namely that psychic powers were cultivated by ancient civilizations, that they could use powers of the human mind that we have allowed to lapse, maybe that idea deserves further consideration. We have gone down a path of leverage and mechanical advantage. We're used to relying on machines, but we hear anecdotal reports of people who have telekinetic powers, who can move things with their minds, of people who have telepathic powers. And our automatic reaction is to just dismiss all of that because science says it's impossible, because science regards consciousness as local to the brain and doesn't see how it can exert itself outside of that. But maybe we should open up to those possibilities, that we're dealing with a very different kind of culture that used techniques that we have allowed to lapse. And maybe we could wake those techniques up again. Maybe the ability of human beings to do almost superhuman things is resident within all of us, but sleeping.
Well, it's pure speculation that they use some sort of a telekinetic power, but it's
pure
absolute,
speculation.
But it's absolute that they did something that we don't understand. If you think about the distance between us and the construction, just the modern accepted construction dates of the Great Pyramid, it's more than 5,000 years ago, or close to 5,000 years ago.
Great Pyramid is supposed to be about 4,500 years old,
That's really old.
It's incredibly old, To
think that someone back then could do something that would perplex us today with modern machinery. And that somehow or another they figured this out. It's almost like what they had done was leave behind something that was so stupendous stupendous, so monstrously impressive that it would transcend time.
Yeah.
And that you would have to look at it even thousands and thousands of years later and say, hey, like this defies conventional explanation. This is not a simple, and I've seen some of the conventional explanations of the construction of the pyramid, and they conveniently neglect those chambers above the king's chamber.
They do.
They conveniently neglect a lot of those massive stones.
Yeah.
And it's because it's one of those things you just go, oh, I don't know. What is this, Jamie?
There are the chambers
above
above the king's chambers, and each one of those floors consists of a row of 70-ton granite blocks that have been raised 350 feet above the ground. And not only that, but brought from Aswan in the south of Egypt, 500 kilometers south of the Great Pyramid. So,
if there's any time in history where you could go in a time machine and go back and observe, would that be the time?
I am just completely fascinated by the Ice Age at the moment.
If you had one shot to go back and see what it was like in some place, you wouldn't go to the construction of the Great Pyramids?
I think right now where I'd go is 12,800 years ago in the beginning of the Younger Dryas.
Just to see.
Because I think that's where the whole human story changes. I think that's where we change tracks from one path to another path. And following those cataclysmic events of the Younger Dryas between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago, following those, the signs of civilization that we see emerging are not the beginnings of civilization. They're a restarting of civilization that had existed before the cataclysm. And for that reason, I would like to be present during that cataclysmic event, if only to satisfy myself that it was indeed a comet. You see, the one thing there's no dispute about anymore is that the Younger Dryas was a cataclysm. You can't argue about that. The megafauna that die off, the disruption of human activity that takes place at that time, the huge climate changes. This was a cataclysm by any standards. Where the argument still goes on is what caused the cataclysm. I vote strongly for comet, multiple fragments of a comet hitting the North American ice cap and hitting Greenland as well. But there are other researchers in the field, like my colleague Robert Schoch, who thinks that the sun is more involved. This is healthy. This is very, very healthy, that we should be approaching this problem from many different perspectives and trying to figure out what the fuck caused this extraordinary event that occurs at a pivotal moment in the human story. The end of the Stone Age, the beginning of the Mesolithic, the end of the Ice Age, the beginning of the current age of the Earth. And suddenly we see these signs of civilization appearing, and in places like Göbekli those signs already include highly sophisticated knowledge. And that's why I feel we really need to investigate the Amazon. There are three places in the world which are really lacking in the investigation right now. One of them is the Amazon, 5.5 million square kilometers, very little archaeology done. Another is the Sahara Desert. The Sahara Desert, tough place to work. I can understand why there's little archaeology done there, but the Sahara Desert was green during the Ice Age. It had a completely different climate regime. We should consider the possibility that missing parts of the human story are there. And then under the continental shelves, because sea level rose 400 feet. These are three domains that archaeology has largely not investigated, and it has largely not done so. They say, well, why would we spend the money on marine archaeology? It's much better to spend it on looking for shipwrecks rather than looking for signs of a lost civilization, because we archaeologists know there was no lost civilization. So that's the argument for the resources there, and the same with the Amazon, and the same with the Sahara Desert. Very places in the world that those amongst us who are charged with the responsibility of interpreting the past have not looked at are the very places we should be looking at.
Some of the more fascinating pieces of evidence in South America have come out recently about these channels and pathways that they've found in the Amazon that could not have been created any other way but by humans creating irrigation, humans creating, like, it appears like grids, like a city grid.
Definitely. The Amazon is a colossal mystery, and it's one of the subjects that I explore in depth in America before. First of all, to give some basic figures, the Amazon basin is huge. The Amazon basin is 7 million square kilometers in area. And within it, 5.5 million square kilometers remains almost entirely unstudied by archaeologists. And that's the 5.5 million square kilometers that is still covered by dense rainforest. And to put that into perspective, 5.5 million square kilometers is the size of the entire Indian subcontinent. So It's like saying, we've done world archaeology, but we've just ignored India, We've done world archaeology, but we've just ignored the Amazon. It's the same argument. 5.5 million square kilometers. The view was, again, there was a dogma. There was a preconception. Human beings couldn't have flourished in the Amazon. It's not a resource-rich area. The soils are poor. It's a difficult area, challenging to get to, very far from the Bering Straits. So the view was that humans hadn't entered the Amazon until about 1,000 years ago. And then gradually, little by little, that view has begun to change. And it's begun to change because of the tragic clearances of the Amazon, because the Amazon rainforest is literally being cut down and turned into soybean farms and cattle ranches. And in that cutting down process has emerged things that shouldn't be there at all. For example, evidence that large cities flourished in the Amazon, enormous cities, which were larger than there was a Spanish explorer who went down the Amazon River system in 1541 to 1542. He was the first European to cross the entire length of South America from west to east along the Amazon. He reported seeing incredible cities, advanced arts and crafts, millions of people, a thriving culture. And 100 years later, when other Europeans got into the Amazon, they couldn't find these cities. So they said, Francisco Orellana, that was his name, made it all up. It was just a fantasy. And then in the last decade, as the clearances of the Amazon have proceeded, we've begun to see the traces of those cities. What happened was that the Spaniards brought smallpox into the Amazon. Smallpox devastated the local population because there was no immunity to it. There was a massive die-off. The cities were deserted. Within 50 years, they were completely overgrown by the jungle, and that's why they were not seen by the explorers who came in 100 years later. But now the jungle's being cleared, those cities are emerging, and we can say that a city like London, which had a population of roughly 50,000 in the 16th century, there were cities of that size all over the Amazon. Wow. Huge numbers of them. And a possible total population of the Amazon that exceeded 20 million people.
What?
Yes, 20 million. This is the latest evidence from the Amazon. And then you ask yourself, how did they do that? How did they feed 20 million people in the Amazon? Because it's a fact, rainforest soils are poor. It's one of the reasons these soybean farms are a really stupid idea, because once you clear the rainforest, the land is largely unfertile and you can't grow stuff on it for very long. So how did they feed all these people? The answer was they invented a soil. And that soil has a name. It's called terra preta. Archaeologists refer to it as Amazonian dark earths or Amazonian black earth. It's a man-made soil. It's thousands of years old. It's full of microbes that are not found in adjoining soil. It's based around biochar. And you can take a handful of 8,000-year-old terra preta and you can add it to barren soil, and that soil will instantly become fertile. It's highly sought after in the Amazon, and it explains how they fed these people. There was science in the Amazon.
How did they create this?
Well, this is something that's not understood. It's still not understood by soil experts to this day as to how that was done, but it's one of many intriguing pieces of evidence of much higher development in the Amazon that it has been given credit for, and of a kind of science in the Amazon.
Jamie's got an image of it up there. So this is it?
This is terra preta, yeah. Exactly,
wow.
Exactly.
And so was that done by burns? Did they use controlled burns?
They did. One way that it was achieved was to do wet burning. Of middens. They would be burned and smolder. They wouldn't burn fiercely, which just produces charcoal. They would burn and smolder, and that what is called biochar would result, and that's part of the fertility of the soil. But the mystery is the microbial content of this soil, which is completely different from the microbes in neighboring soils, and that remains unexplained.
So, what are the theories? Composting, some sort of advanced composting?
Yes, some sort of advanced composting. But again, what has not been explained is the microbial content of these soils. So there, first of all, is an issue of how two things: how large populations get fed in the Amazon, and evidence that there was a culture in the Amazon that was capable of manipulating the environment in such a way that it could support large populations with the invention of terra preta. Secondly, new evidence previously not recognized. The Amazon is basically a garden. The Amazon is a man-made rainforest. there are certain trees like Brazil nut trees or the ice cream bean tree, which are food crops, which are very, very valuable, and they dominate the tree regime in the Amazon. They're what's referred to as hyperdominant species. In other words, people living in the Amazon over thousands of years selected certain trees, which they then cultivated and grew. So the whole thing is not simply a wild, pristine rainforest. It's a very ancient man-made environment. And emerging from that man-made environment, as well as evidence of large cities, large populations, and this mysterious dark earth, are huge geometrical structures. And again, I go into this at length in America before because I love this mystery. We have in the UK structures that are called henges. I live in the city of Bath, and about 30 miles away there's a beautiful site called Avebury and another more famous site called Stonehenge. And what a henge is a ditch which has been dug deep, and then an embankment has been pushed up outside the ditch. When people first saw these structures, they wondered if they'd been built for defense. But then it became obvious they hadn't been built for defense, because if you want to create a moat, you put it outside your embankment, not inside your embankment. So a henge is an earthwork which consists of a deep moat with a large embankment outside it. And it can be circular, it can be square, and in the UK and other parts of Europe, it often contains stone circles, megalithic stone circles as well. But the henge itself is entirely an earthwork. What we find in the Amazon are thousands of henges that are now beginning to emerge from the cleared area of the jungle, and others that have been identified for the first time with LiDAR. LiDAR technology is being employed in the Amazon. It's non-destructive. You can see what's under the trees.
What is LiDAR?
Light imaging and detective radar. They bounce laser beams down into the jungle. There's a whole pattern of them. You need helicopters, and but it doesn't damage the rainforest. And you can strip away and see what's there. If this isn't too much of a diversion, let me give you the example of Guatemala. Guatemala is a small country. If I remember correctly, it's not much more than 100,000 square kilometers in size. It is filled with intriguing Mayan ruins. Everybody has heard of Tikal. What archaeologists didn't know was that literally within walking distance of Tikal, surrounding that whole area were more than 60,000 structures that they hadn't identified. And these have all been identified by LiDAR in a country that's just 100,000 kilometers in area. So you have to ask yourself, in that 5.5 million square kilometers of the Amazon, if LiDAR technology could be applied comprehensively, what would we find beneath there? And the evidence already is extremely tempting and extremely tantalizing. And I'm intrigued by these huge geometrical figures, which involve primarily circles and squares. And they are classic henges in the sense that they are deep ditches surrounded by huge embankments. They're extremely geometrical. For example, you can find an octagon surrounding a square. At a place called Jacosá in the Amazon, you can find a square perfectly enclosing a circle. Now, that is an exercise called squaring the circle that our academics have given to the Greeks. They said the Greeks were the first people who performed that exercise. But now we find in dated sites in the Amazon that this was being done in the Amazon long before the Greeks.
What are the dates?
The earliest dates that have been found in these sites now are about 3,500 years old. About 3,500 years old. But the evidence is that the sites have been constantly remade. And what intrigues me is what remains in that 5.5 million square kilometers that has not been investigated yet. We are just, I think, looking at the edges of a mystery. The archaeologists involved, who are mainly from Finland and also from Brazil, feel the same. Their estimate is that there are thousands of these structures remaining in the jungle, and they're open as to how old they may ultimately prove to be. The investigation needs to be done. But what's fascinating about them is this very powerful geometry and astronomy. So a number of the sites are perfectly aligned to true north, true south, true east, and true west. I'm not talking about magnetic north. I'm talking about true astronomical north. To do that, there's only one way to do it, and that's with astronomy. So that tells us that astronomers were at work in the Amazon. The geometry is very complex and very precise. That tells us that people with geometrical skills were at work in the Amazon. And thirdly, the scale of the sites of hundreds of meters, gigantic earthworks on the scale of hundreds of meters, tells us that this was highly organized project that was undertaken on a very large scale by very large numbers of people. It's a wonderful mystery, and it deserves much further attention. And that's Jacosa, exactly, the squares, squaring the circles. So you can see the outside embankment, and then inside it is the square ditch, and then there's another embankment inside that, and a circle inside that.
It's crazy that they made a road right through that. What assholes.
A modern road, yeah, because there's no respect for the ancient world, unfortunately.
And there's another one. Look at that! Wow, that's incredible.
So there are thousands of these
found the stuff that they found in the Amazon. What imaging technology were they using to find all this?
Initially, it was entirely found because areas of the rainforest had been cleared. Economic interests said, we want to make a cattle ranch here, or we want to make a soya bean farm here. So we're just going to clear the rainforest. In the process of clearing the rainforest, they start discovering these earthworks that had previously been completely overgrown by the jungle. Then the next step was to say, what could we do to find out more about this? Obviously, they don't want to destroy more jungle, and luckily we have a technology which is LiDAR, as I mentioned, which uses radar. And using LiDAR, they've been able to identify many more of these sites, and then to get to the sites without destroying the jungle, and to begin excavations on them, and to find that they go back, in the cases of the ones that have been explored so far, at least 3,000 years. This is an intriguing development, completely unexplained in our understanding of the Amazon. And what it suggests is a heritage of extremely ancient knowledge. You don't wake up one morning and create a perfectly geometrical square or circular earthwork that's perfectly aligned to true north, south, east, and west on an enormous scale. There has to be a background to that. There has to be a reason for doing it. And the evidence is none of these sites were lived in. There's no habitation refuse found in them whatsoever. We don't know what they were used for. I make the case in America before that they're connected to a system of ideas which is found all around the world, which is to do with death and the afterlife destiny of the soul.
But before we do anything, I think we should probably address what we know now about the debate that you had with Flint Dibble. Yeah. So that was the last time we were here. I appreciate that he came on, and I thought it was going to be an interesting discussion, but it turned out he played fast and loose with the truth, and distorted quite a bit of information that were some key points that you had discussed, one of them being the amount of shipwrecks that were discovered. He greatly inflated the amount of shipwrecks that have been discovered. And then you released a video today that went over a lot of this stuff. And one of the things that went over is the oldest shipwreck that we are currently available. It's about 4,000 years old?
About 6,000.
6,000?
The Dokos shipwreck.
But there's nothing left of the ship.
No.
And this is what's important. What he was trying to say was that it would be preserved by the cold water. That turns out to not be the truth at all. And that these ships that are 6,000 years old, there's nothing left of the actual boat itself. The only thing that's left is pottery and coins and things of the like.
Yeah. And especially when you consider the possibility of ships having gone through a cataclysm.
Right.
It's not likely to, but there's a more central point than that, which really needed to be brought up by the archaeologists in this, which is that archaeology universally accepts that human beings were seafarers as much as 50,000 years ago. And I put the evidence on this into the video. It's not even in dispute. Like the island of Cyprus, the nearest Turkish coast is about 60 kilometers from there. It's always been surrounded by huge deeps. It's always been an island, even at the peak of the sea level, lowest sea level during the Ice Age. Cyprus was always an island. And yet, there's evidence now that it was settled 14,000 years ago, certainly 14,000 to 12,500 years ago. It was settled, in other words, during the Ice Age. And these were large planned migrations. When you're going to migrate to an island, you can't just go 2 or 3 people by accident because you'll become extinct. You have to bring in quite a large population. And they reckon that populations of 1,000 or so were being brought across that water, across the ocean, across the Mediterranean Sea to Cyprus near the end of the last ice age. But not a single ship has survived to testify to that. Same with Australia. 50,000 years ago, human beings got there, and even at the lowest sea level, they would have had to cross about 90 kilometers of open water in large numbers. And again, no ships have been found to testify to that, yet archaeologists accept that they got there by ship. So to say that we haven't found any ships from the Ice Age is not really evidence about anything.
And if we're finding the oldest ships that we currently are aware of, which is, as you said, about 6,000 years ago, if you tack on another 6,000 years of decay on top of that,
Sure.
what are the odds you're going to find anything?
I think the odds are very, very low.
Now, if we had that evidence and that information when we were confronting Flint, that would have been a very different conversation.
Totally.
But the arrogance in which he distributed that fake information was it's disturbing. It sucks when people just want to win and they don't want to get to the truth.
It does.
And the truth is it's very fascinating. Another thing that was very fascinating that he discussed, I didn't watch your whole video, but it was about seeds. I asked the question, there's a very distinct, noticeable difference between domestic seeds and seeds that are wild. And the difference is the seeds that are wild, they break off easier because it makes sense that it would help them prosper. It would help them be able to spread the seed if it broke off the plant easier. Yeah. And so they can recognize that. And then when they start using large-scale agriculture, the seeds become more robust and stick to the to the plant, because it makes sense that it would, if you're going to harvest all of the plants and then take the seeds off of it, for the plant to prosper, you would want the seeds to be more robust. So there's these changes. And I said, have they ever noticed a domesticated seed going back and having the characteristics of a wild seed? He said no. Yeah. But that's not true.
That's
either.
not true either. No.
No.
It's not. It's not true. And the whole notion of the origins of agriculture, I think archaeologists got a great deal more work to do on that. Often, I'm misrepresented as saying that survivors of my supposed lost civilization would have brought crops with them. I think that's most unlikely in a cataclysmic situation. What they brought with them was the knowledge that crops can be domesticated. And it's precisely during the Younger Dryas that we see that shift from undomesticated to domesticated crops in the archaeological record. And what I'm suggesting is that these were people who had already conquered that problem. They'd already solved that problem. They knew it could be done, and they brought that knowledge with them and shared that knowledge with the people that they took refuge amongst. Because I don't think we're looking at a mass migration. I think we're looking at a few survivors who are taking refuge after a global cataclysm.
You know, it's just very unfortunate when you have a debate and one person is an expert and they're not truthful, and it just.
I think it's very bad. I think it's very bad for archaeology.
It is, because it reinforces all the things that you've been saying.
It does. I mean, to be honest, I felt beaten up after that debate. But looking back in retrospect on the whole thing, I think it actually makes the point that we have a very arrogant, very controlling discipline in archaeology, which has established a narrative about the past, and which will fight tooth and nail to maintain that narrative, including using dirty tricks. And I think instead of smearing people who talk about the possibility of a lost civilization, or people who even talk about aliens, I think instead of smearing them, archaeology should understand why people are asking those questions. And people are asking those questions because they're not satisfied with what archaeology is offering. It's not providing a nurturing, satisfying resolution to many of the problems that come from the past. And that's what drives me is curiosity about anomalies in the past. I'm often misrepresented as saying that somehow I've proved that a lost civilization existed, and I don't claim to have proved that. What I do say is, join me on this journey. There are mysteries in the past. Let's see if they're explained by archaeology or if they're not explained. And I found quite a number that are not explained by archaeology, and that's particularly to do with astronomical alignments, with traditions that are shared all around the world. It's to do with things that archaeologists by and large don't study.
Well, it's also one of the things that's fascinating is just even with conventional archaeology, the dates keep getting pushed further and further back.
Further and further back.
And this is one of the things, the White Sands, New Mexico stuff that you have
Yes.
on episode 1.
That's right. Which is, by the way, White Sands. Have you been there?
No, I haven't.
What an incredible,
looks amazing.
ethereal, otherworldly place. And Alamogordo is sitting right in the middle of that. This is where they did the nuclear tests and the
Yikes.
the trinitite,
Yeah.
which was created there. And there's gypsum sand. It's not normal. It's just the most amazing place. And there, yes, they found human footprints dated back more than 23,000 years.
What do they think that environment was like 22,000 years ago?
Well, it would still have been like that. It would have
Really?
been gypsum dunes then in that place. Otherwise,
Gypsum dunes.
they wouldn't have left the footprints. I'm not exactly sure why the gypsum is there, but there it is.
Is that the same stuff they use for like gypsum board for construction?
I reckon so, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a very fine, very white sand,
Mm.
and it just goes on forever, and the dunes are sculpted and massive and huge. And we had an amazing time there.
So it looked incredible. So they found footprints there, and these are absolutely human footprints, and there's not just a few of them, there's thousands of them.
There's thousands of them, and what's amazing when you actually see the footprints is you can see the interactions between the human beings and animals. You can see that somebody is reacting to a giant sloth which has suddenly turned around, and the person who's behind it suddenly turns around as well.
Wow.
There's mammoth footprints overlaying human footprints, and then human footprints overlaying those, and it goes down for meters under the ground. So you have a very deep stratification of these impressions that have been left behind by our ancestors, and by animals that are now completely extinct. Mammoths and mastodons went extinct during the Younger Dryas, but there are their footprints from 23,000 years ago, side by side with the footprints of human beings. It's very intimate to see a footprint, to see those 5 toes, to see the heel mark, to see sometimes a child walking beside a mother. That's there in the record as well.
Wow.
It's quite something special, and it opens the door. Archaeology has been very reluctant to accept a much older peopling of the Americas than previously was held. It was held for a long time, that it was about 13,000 years ago. They've abandoned that now. They did cling on tooth and nail for decades, but that's been abandoned. It's accepted that human beings came here long before 13,000 years ago. And White Sands is one of the places which provides just absolute, definite, irrefutable evidence of that. Often remember a site called the Cerruti Mastodon site in San Diego. I went to see the exhibits are in the San Diego Natural History Museum, and I talked with the expert there, Dr. Tom Desmarais, and they are convinced that they are looking at human traces there. It was a butchering of a mastodon, but the way the bones were broken and the marrow was extracted, they don't see any other way that this could have been done except by human beings. The thing is, it's 130,000 years old, not 23,000 years old, not 13,000 years old, but 130,000 years old. And, this opens the possibility that human beings have been in the Americas before they were in Europe. And that becomes...
That's crazy.
That's a door that opens all kinds of possibilities which have been neglected. I think the prejudice is the prejudice that the Americas were only settled very late in the human story led archaeology to not have their eye on the possibility of what happens if they were here earlier.
Right.
And they tend not to look to that.
Well, what I was going to ask is, as they're digging deeper and deeper and they're finding these footprints in White Sands, New Mexico, is there a possibility that they could dig deeper still and find things that are even older?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
How do they know where to go?
It was found by accident. The first footprints were found completely by accident, and they were found by indigenous local people who alerted the National Park Service to them, and we have a number of indigenous spokespeople who speak to the White Sands mystery and how it feels for them, the emotional feeling of seeing the footprints of their ancestors from 23,000 years ago. The thing is that the dunes are constantly shifting, and sometimes the footprints will be covered up, and then wind will reveal them again. And they're fragile; they can be easily destroyed and wiped off. And in a way, it's a miracle that they've survived. But to see the stride of a mammoth, you see how far apart those huge footpads are. and to realize this thing was alive. This thing existed on this planet. Human beings interacted with it. It's a very compelling evidence for an earlier settlement of the Americas.
There is some evidence that human beings came across the Bering Land Bridge.
Oh, yeah.
So that probably means there was people already here and people came here from Asia.
Almost certainly. And the way the evidence is looking, it's most likely that South America was settled first, before North America was settled. And that raises all kinds of questions. And we've gone into this in Season 2 of Ancient Apocalypse, primarily to do with the DNA evidence of a direct connection between the peoples of New Guinea and Australia and the peoples of certain tribes in South America. And that's very ancient, very old DNA evidence in South America, but also to do with archaeological sites like Monteverde. I did bring up the issue of Tom Dillahay the last time we were on when Flint was here. And Tom Dillahay, who found Monteverde, who excavated Monteverde in South America and realized that it was plus 14,000 years old and therefore a lot older than what was then accepted as the model for the first peoples in North America. When he put that idea forward, he was eviscerated by his colleagues in archaeology. It took them a decade to come round to accepting that actually he was right. And there are many other sites in South America going back 30,000+ years. They're all controversial because they conflict with an existing model. But I think instead of clinging on to existing models, I think it's one of the problems with archaeology, is this territoriality, this kind of control of the past. I think instead of doing that, it would be nicer if archaeology was a little bit more welcoming, a little bit more open to new and different ideas.
Unfortunately, that's just the thing when people are supposed experts in a subject and someone comes along that's also been studying it, but from an untraditional perspective. Yeah. People reject that.
I've come to the point, and I'm going to say some strong words here.
Get crazy, Graham Hancock.
I've come to the point where I believe that some archaeologists, not all of them, this problem is with a small number of archaeologists, but they're extremely vocal. I think what we're looking at is a kind of abuse of power. Archaeologists have a power. They are the official spokespeople for the past, and they use that power to slap down any point of view that doesn't agree with theirs. So I think that there's an abuse of power there, and at the same time, there's not a realization that that's happening, because the mindset that drives it is the feeling that members of the general public are unable to decide things for themselves. This is the arrogance of archaeology, that they feel that they have to tell people what to think about the past, and they underestimate the intelligence of the public and the ability of the public to discern, to make choices between different possibilities about the past. They think that archaeologists seem to think that only one possibility of the past must be considered by the general public, and that's their possibility. And it reminds me a lot of the heresy hunters back in the 16th century. You know, the people who disagreed with their point of view got burned at the stake. Well, you don't get burned at the stake today, but you can get lynched by a mob of archaeologists.
And I couldn't agree more. My hope is that what you were saying and what we were discussing earlier about how the internet has sort of eroded our faith in many institutions as being the only or the primary source of knowledge, that I hope that takes place globally in terms of the way we view government. Yeah. And that we do, and that your idea of like, I love what America stands for. And what America stands for is kind of a nation that's where people go to. You know, this is one of the more insidious problems with this idea of building walls and keeping people out and making it incredibly difficult to get here. The reason why I'm here is because it was pretty easy to get here. Yeah, that's why I'm here.
That's the essence of America, a free and open society.
Come here and do better. Yeah. That's the whole idea behind it. And I would hope that this idea of being able to just, if you want to do better, that you can anywhere in the world. Yeah. This could eventually spread out. Yeah. This is my hope.
I believe it can spread out, and you know, I see many signs of hope in America. America has become a big part of my life, not just because I wrote this book, but because I have children who are now living in America. I have a son and daughter-in-law who live in LA. I have another son and daughter-in-law who live in Boston. America, I'm British, but America has become a very central part of my life, and it's a fascinating and amazing country, and it's been my privilege to travel thousands of miles across America, across many, many, many different states. And I love this country. It's an amazing place. Only in America could we see happening what has happened with cannabis. You know, the fact that at a local level, individuals have got together, mobilized petitions, organized votes, and changed the law. Literally stuck a finger up at central government and said, fuck off. This is none of your business. What I do with my consciousness in the inner sanctum of my own life is not the business of the state. That's a very American feeling. It's something that you don't find often in other countries where the state is granted much more power and much more authority than it perhaps should be. Americans are naturally questioning of government authority. And that is what has led to the increasing legalization of cannabis, which is going to change the world in lots of ways. But then ironically, at the same time, see, the thing about democracies is that in order to get things done in a democracy, you need to persuade people of your point of view. So information becomes very important in democracies. And information can be abused. People can be misled with information. They can be told that what they're receiving is the truth, whereas in fact it's not the truth. And you can end up with a kind of dictatorship that the people have given their assent to on the basis of false information. And frankly, I'd rather have a real dictatorship, which is out in the open and clear, rather than one that has been subtly manipulated into position through manipulating the views of the voters. But I am and remain enormously encouraged by America. It may seem like a trivial issue, but the fact that state by state cannabis is being legalized, and that is resulting from a grassroots movement, that this enormous change has been made. It's ironic, it's strange that at the federal level, even though, 8 states now totally legal for recreational, 24 states legal for medical use, that at the federal level it's still a Schedule I controlled drug. This is a huge state of dissonance that exists, and America's going to have to put it right. What it says to me is that people can change things. People can get together at the local level and they can make a better world, because there's no doubt that the cannabis laws were vicious and wrong and cruel and evil and ruined people's lives for decades. And it's people who've changed that. It's not government who's changed that. It's the people at the grassroots level. America's a country where that can happen. And I remain encouraged about the role of the American people, while often in despair about the role of the American state.
Yeah, I'm encouraged as well. And, you know, it's interesting. Ben and Jerry released something yesterday, which is really, or on 420, I should say, which was talking about the drug laws in this country and talking about how many, it's really what opens up next is psilocybin is now going to be on the ballot.
Absolutely.
And when that opens up, I mean, what you really think marijuana is a gateway drug? Well, guess what? It is if psilocybin gets in.
Yes.
Because psilocybin can legitimately change the world.
It certainly can.
It really, I mean, I think marijuana can change the world, and I really do think that cannabis is changing people's perceptions and making people more calm and friendly. And even what they talk about with paranoia, I welcome that. And the reason why I welcome that is I think people are entirely too cocky.
Yeah.
The life we live is bizarre as you could ever imagine in a book, and we're just accustomed to it because it's our day-to-day
Take
existence.
it all for granted. Yeah.
Marijuana removes those blinders.
It does.
And it really makes you understand that this is a strange, strange life. And a lot of these pitfalls and problems that we have in our society are due to fear, and they're due to ignorance, and they're due to this lack of connection with each other. And cannabis and many of these other psychedelic drugs, they encourage this connection with each other, which is, I think, what we need.
It's certainly what we need, and it's an aberration in human culture that we've created a society that demonized these substances and that made them illegal. It's a relatively recent thing. It's really just the last 100 years. It's a tiny part of the human story, and yet we're so arrogant as a society that we could set aside thousands of years of human tradition and experience and wisdom working with the plant medicines. We just set it aside, turn them into criminal substances, and say we know everything. What a huge and stupid mistake that is. On cannabis as a quote-unquote gateway drug, it absolutely is in this sense that the legalization of cannabis is going to open the doors to, as you say, to the legalization of psychedelics, because what's happening is that the population is completely waking up to the fact that they have been bullshitted and lied to about cannabis for the best part of a century. And once that dawns on people, the realization at a direct personal level, here's this herb I love. I have been lied to, systematically misinformed by central government about this herb. That leads to questioning of everything that central government does. And so in that sense, it is a gateway to a questioning society. The psychedelics are different in that psilocybin actually does lead you to question stuff.
Yes.
It leads you to really ask questions about everything, about your role in the world, about you as a person, about how you relate to other people, and about the whole system on this planet and the beautiful, gorgeous planet that we have and what we're doing to it. That also enters awareness. So
it erodes confidence in authority, and it also erodes confidence in authority that doesn't have experiences that you've experienced.
Exactly.
That's the part of the problem, is that these people that are holding people back from these psychedelic experiences, they've never had them.
They've never had them.
So they don't even know what they're rallying against.
They're coming to it from a place of fear and prejudice. Yes. They're simply accepting stuff that they've been told without really thinking it through and examining it. And again, it's a failure of what human beings should be doing. We have to get rid of this fear.
And ironically, it's bad for them as well. It's
course.
bad for the people that are actually encouraging these laws to be enforced.
Yes, it's bad for the whole of society.
Yes.
Because it is healthy for a society where adults become self-realized individuals, where they make their own responsible choices about their own lives, where they don't say, "Oh, government must make this choice for me." That's the next step for humanity. We need to start becoming our own leaders and making our own choices. And that is what's being revealed now, that we're getting to the skull beneath the smile of the war on drugs. We're realizing that it's part of a big program of lying that has been about keeping people's minds closed down, not wanting free thinking. I've made this point several times, but our society is not against altered states of consciousness as such. Our society will allow Big Pharma to make billions of dollars with drugs that alter consciousness, like Seroxat and Prozac, antidepressants, which in my opinion, having had some experience of them, are amongst the most horrible drugs on the planet. They are very harmful, very dangerous drugs, but they're completely legal and they're encouraged with our system. Likewise, alcohol, very dangerous drug, causes fights, causes drunk driving accidents, leads to cirrhosis of the liver, completely legal and open. Our society is not against altered states of consciousness. As such, it's against particular kinds of altered states of consciousness that lead to questioning of the existing control system. That's what's going on here.
Hear, hear. Well said.
And as you know, I have my own story with cannabis.
Yes, well, you and I had a moment.
We had a moment, which was quite a life-changing moment for me, because if I may just rehearse a little bit of this for the audience. In 2011, I had a series of ayahuasca sessions in which it was shown to me that I was using cannabis completely wrong, that it had become a dominant force in my life, that it was making me, you're speaking about paranoia, and I agree with you, paranoia is a useful thing, if only to overcome it, that it was making me paranoid, that it was making me suspicious, that I approached everybody around me in a state of suspicion. And I was shown this by ayahuasca and given a very strong message: you need to quit cannabis. What I didn't realize at the time is that the problem was not cannabis, the problem was me, that I needed to fix those aspects of myself before I could have a proper relationship with cannabis. So after that ayahuasca session, having smoked cannabis for decades, literally 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, I quit. I quit for 3 years. And then I'm on your show, and we're sitting opposite one another as we are now, and you ask me a question, are you still off the cannabis? And I say, well, I'm thinking of dipping my toes back in the water, at which point you produce a joint. and we smoke it together. First of all, after 3 years, your tolerance is way down on cannabis. So I got really stoned. I did listen to that interview back, and somehow I held it together.
Oh, you held it together brilliantly. You opened up, and it was like a wave of information came pouring out of you. It was wonderful to watch.
It was a liberation for me. And what it said to me is, it's time to go back to cannabis, but perhaps in a different way. I need a different relationship with this amazing medicine. And if I can forge that, if I can make that different relationship happen, then it can be a constructive and positive part of my life. And I can say definitely that has been the case. And
that's excellent.
And so it's all thanks to you, Joe. I probably would still be off cannabis if it hadn't been for that joint.
Yes, yes. After a 24-year intense relationship with the green goddess or the green bitch, depending on what mood she's in, I had to stop. I've come in for some. I've come in for some criticism for this, and I feel it's important to say that I hugely value and love cannabis. I think it's a wonderful herbal ally. And I don't think that I would ever have written my books of historical mystery if I had not encountered cannabis rather late in life. I did not smoke any dope until I was 37 years old, and I'm now 62.
Wow.
And roughly around about the age of 38, that's when I started getting into historical mysteries. Before that, it was all...
Of course, it's total stoner stuff.
Absolutely. Before that, it was all current affairs, you know.
Right.
So, but suddenly something opened up for me, and I'm very grateful to the herb for that. And initially, again, I need to emphasize this. I think the problem I eventually ended up having with cannabis, it's not the fault of cannabis, it's the fault of Graham Hancock. I think my relationship became abusive with the herb. It was not initially.
Right.
Initially, it was something I would do evenings and weekends. I would not try to write while I was actually stoned. I would do my day's work and then chill out in the evening with a pipe or a joint. That was how it was for me for quite a while. And I went through my first big historical mystery book, The Sign and the Seal, which was published in 1992, with that pattern. In other words, that I would be smoking only after I downed tools at the end of the evening and I was ready to chill. Mm-hmm. And that worked fine. But then when I started writing Fingerprints of the Gods, which was the biggest book I've ever done, a 5 million copy bestseller all around the world, when I started writing that, I thought I'll experiment. Let's see if I can be stoned and write. And I discovered that I could. I could be stoned and write. And I liked being stoned so much that, in a way, it urged me to just write all the time, you know, because then I had this incredibly good reason to be stoned all the time. And it took away all the physical boredom of sitting there in my chair in front of my computer screen. Just everything went away, and I drifted into this space where I could explore ideas and manifest those ideas down on the page. And that's when I began what was to become ultimately an abusive relationship with cannabis, which that I would fire up in those days my joint or my pipe at 9 or 10 in the morning, and I'm a hard worker. I work 16 hours a day very often when I'm writing. So come 2 o'clock the next morning, I'd still be there smoking away. And as the years went by, this became a permanent daily pattern for me, whether I was writing or not. I would be stoned from the moment I got up until the moment I went to bed. And most people who came by my house or talked to me on the phone, they would have had absolutely no idea, because I was completely in control. I didn't seem high. I could hold a rational conversation. I was just fine, and I just felt really good. And this is how it went on for many years. And later on, around about 2005, actually, I think, perhaps a little earlier, one of my kids told me that, you know, this smoke is, you don't need to have combustion products. Why don't you use a vaporizer? So I bought myself a volcano, and on the internet, and then I heard that the British government was going to ban all peripherals. So I bought myself 2 more volcanoes. Volcanoes are quite expensive, but that shows how dedicated I was.
You had to make sure that you covered your bases.
I had to make sure that I covered my bases, and then I would be vaporizing from 9 in the morning until 2 o'clock the next morning, 7 days a week, and increasingly strong strains. And this is one thing that I would say: if we lived in an irrational regime, where there was no attempt by the government to police our states of consciousness, we could have much more choice in the kind of cannabis we get hold of. For example, I would have liked to have cannabis with much more CBD and maybe less THC. But the varieties I was smoking were very, very THC loaded.
What's the difference in effect?
Well, okay. I mean, it depends how much you buy into the research on this, but a lot of good science has been done, and the suggestion is that THC can promote or reveal. I don't want to blame the herb for anything. It can reveal certain psychotic tendencies in oneself, and this is the well-known paranoia, which many people associate with smoking cannabis. The CBD is an antipsychotic agent, so the natural herb is balanced with CBD and THC. And it looks after you very well. But where we go into intensive breeding of the herb, focusing on the element that makes you really high, which is the THC, then we get a herb that is somewhat unbalanced as a result of the interference of humanity. But you get more bang for your buck. That's a very strong herb. And I began to like a particular variety called cheese. I think it's called cheese because it smells like old socks or Stilton, like a blue cheese. And I found a grower who lived local to me who was just having amazing green fingers, and I would buy from him, and I would sometimes have 5 or 6 ounces of the herb in my house because I was blazing through this stuff at a tremendous rate.
That's enough where you could get in trouble for
well,
dealing.
that's where the paranoia starts to become legitimate, because actually they can break down your door and they can confiscate your home and take away your liberty and fuck you up forever. They can do that, and so every time I heard a ring at the door or a car came up the street, I would get
paranoid.
Get paranoid.
And you were high, so that didn't help.
And I was high, yeah, and I was high.
Did you get paranoid when you were high?
Well, this is one of the reasons why. Look, what happened to me was that around about 2003, I started, for reasons of research initially, working with ayahuasca, the vine of souls. This is the powerful psychedelic brew which has been consumed by shamanistic cultures in the Amazon for thousands and thousands of years. And it's not called the vine of souls for nothing. It's an extraordinary portal into other realms, and in some ways those realms are associated with death and perhaps what waits for us after death. Nobody knows the answer to that, but in ayahuasca you have certain experiences relating to that. And right from the beginning, when I started to drink ayahuasca, I mean, this sounds nuts to anybody who hasn't done DMT or who hasn't drunk ayahuasca, but you do meet intelligent entities. And more around the world, people drinking ayahuasca are meeting this goddess figure. She might appear as a serpent. She might appear as a woman. She might appear as some kind of panther or jaguar. Very powerful, tough love kind of lady who reveals to you the truth about yourself and just says, you fucking deal with it because that's how you are.
Right.
And what the truth that was revealed to me from quite early on was my relationship with cannabis had got out of balance, and I needed to get it back into balance. And of course, I ignored those messages completely because I was so much in love with my cannabis relationship. In fact, my wife said that really it was like I had a mistress, who I spent all my time with was the cannabis rather than her. And this went on for many, many years. Now, the paranoia aspect, okay, I'm going to bare my heart here, and, I believe in being honest. The paranoia aspect began to affect my relationship with my beloved partner, Santha, who I just love from the bottom of my heart. And she is the best, the most pure-hearted, generous-spirited, loving lady it's possible to imagine. But I started to develop all kinds of suspicions about her, which were completely groundless. I started to imagine all sorts of stuff were going on, and then I started to act towards her as though those suspicions were real. And all of this was also related to my consumption of cannabis. It was not caused by my consumption of cannabis. I think this is a latent aspect of my own personality. It was being revealed by this over-abuse of the cannabis herb.
Right.
And therefore, I was making my beautiful partner's life a misery sometimes. Not every day, but sometimes. And she was patiently putting up with this, but she was suffering. And we went down to Brazil in October 2011. And if I had been told when we got on that plane and went down to Brazil that when I came back 2 weeks later, I would probably never smoke cannabis again, I would have laughed in the face of the person who told me that. But the encounters that I had with the spirit of ayahuasca, whatever that is. I'm willing to accept that there is no spirit of ayahuasca, that it's all something we generate out of our brains. But for me, she manifests as like a goddess.
Right.
And the encounters I had with that, and I do think she's real. That's just my personal belief system.
Right.
And those encounters that I had were incredibly powerful. And she took me to a place that was something like hell. And she took me to a place that was something like the judgment scene in the ancient Egyptian religion. Now, the judgment scene is a place where your heart is weighed in the scales against the feather of truth and harmony and cosmic justice. And you do not want your heart to be heavy in those scales. You want to be able to look back on your life and say, I did good. I did not add to the misery in the world. I did something worthwhile with this incredible gift of life that the universe gave me. And everything you've done, every second, every minute of your life is completely transparent. Every thought, every action, everything you did from the moment you became conscious until the moment of your death is laid out before you, and there's no hiding from it. Like, we're great at creating illusions about our own behavior and persuading ourselves that we're behaving just fine. In the Judgment Hall of Osiris, which is also called the Hall of Ma'at, where this scene takes place, all of that's stripped away, and you confront the truth. And I was put there, and I confronted the truth about myself, and I saw the way that I was behaving towards my partner, and I was shown that this had to stop. Otherwise, I was going to pay a huge price for it. And I had a series of terrifying experiences, which my partner Sansa shared with me, because we were drinking ayahuasca together, and at a certain point entities came to her, and she had the experience of her heart being pulled out of her chest, and the entity said to her, and she thought she was going to die, and the entity said to her, we're going to do this to you to teach Graham a lesson. And Santa communicated that to me, and I would rank that as probably the single most terrifying night of my entire life, and I've had some terrifying nights. That was just absolutely scared rigid, and I came out of that with a feeling, a very clear feeling. In ayahuasca, we have sharings. The next day after you've drunk the brew, you share with the rest of the group who you've drunk with the experiences you had the night before, as much as you want to share. And what I shared, because I still didn't believe that I could stop smoking cannabis, what I shared was that I was going to change my relationship with cannabis and to get to a place where cannabis was serving me again rather than me serving her. And that's what I believed. But when I got back to England, long flight, what's the first thing I do? I get out my vaporizer, get out my stash, fire up the vaporizer, and fill a nice bag of vapor.
You say it so nostalgically.
Well, I miss it. I miss it. You know, this was cannabis is such a beautiful, sensual ally if she's used right. And
so, do you think it's just an imbalance issue with the CBD THC ratio? And
well, let me just finish with what happened to me. So I fill up the bag, and I'm down there in my basement. And I take the first draw, and I'm suddenly filled with the most intense feelings of horror and loathing. And it is exactly like I'm back in that space that ayahuasca took me to. And I try a second puff, and I can't do it. I physically could not continue. I knew that I just could not continue. I expressed the vapor out of the bag. Wow. I crumpled up the bag. I put it away, and the next day I got rid of several ounces of good cannabis. Yeah,
son.
I know, it's terrible. It's a terrible thing to do, but for me it was the right thing to do. 24 years, non-stop relationship with cannabis, definitely abusing the herb. I had got to the point where the only rational course of action was what I was shown in ayahuasca, which was to stop. And I don't know whether it was because there was way too much THC and not enough CBD, or whether it was just me not being responsible for my own behavior. I go around, saying that I believe in adult responsibility, and I do, but I don't think I was being responsible. I don't think I was using the herb in a responsible way. I don't think I was using it in a respectful way, right. And I paid a price for that.
Well, that's very honest and forthcoming of you to talk about it, and it's very uncomfortable for people to discuss mistakes they've made or paths they've gone down that they didn't, for whatever reason, they got caught up in the momentum. They didn't see where it was headed until they hit the wall. Mm-hmm. It sounds like you have a legitimate chemical reaction to it. It doesn't just sound like it doesn't just sound like an abusive relationship, because the effect that it was having, the extreme paranoia effect and the unease. Do you take care of your body? Do you work out? Do you do any exercise?
Not enough. I do some calisthenics. I don't do a whole lot of.
You should do yoga. How do you not do yoga? You should do yoga, man. Yeah. Graham Hancock, yoga has your name on it.
Oddly enough, somebody's come up to me recently and suggested I join a yoga class.
Listen, man, you have to join it yesterday.
Okay.
For real.
Yeah.
It's for a guy like you, because it's a way to get high without doing any drugs. There's only one time in my whole life I did it, but I got so high after a yoga session that it was like I just smoked weed. Like I felt exactly like I just smoked a lot of weed. And I was sitting there in a hotel room and I was like, this is incredible. Like I would swear I'm high as fuck right now.
Right.
I hadn't smoked in days.
Okay.
And it gives you, it's a reset. It gives you a reset. It gives you like to me, like, it gets rid of the excess and balances things out. Like the reason why people have road rage and they're reacting so strongly to nothing. What, a guy got in front of you and it's going to take you 3 extra seconds to get where you're going?
And you go crazy.
And fuck you and fucking, that is not him and that is not this. The guy, yes, maybe he shouldn't have done that, but does it even bother you? Does it mean anything?
Massive overreaction.
People make mistakes. The guy got in front of you. What's the big deal? Yeah. It's built up. It's built up and there's imbalance.
Right.
There's energy imbalances in people. And
yes.
We're stuck in cubicles or doing jobs that we don't appreciate, and people blow up. The best way to avoid that kind of stuff, to me, is yoga.
Yeah. Well, but what about all the stretching and the joint, like my knees and my hips? I had my hip replaced 6 weeks ago.
Oh my God! 6 weeks ago?
Yeah, 6 weeks ago.
You're walking around like you're fine.
Yeah, 6 weeks ago I was in hospital. I got a massive scar down the outside of my right thigh. They went in there and replaced my hip. But I guess one could start gently and just sort of build up.
Now you would have to talk to an expert about that, because I don't know what physical limitations.
Yeah, apparently none. Now the surgery's gone well, and I'm all set.
So they told you could go running?
I can go running, I can go swimming, I can do anything, yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And it's a serious operation.
It's a serious operation. I know it's a serious operation because I opted to stay awake during it.
Oh, my God.
Well, I'm a writer, I have to have stuff to write about.
Oh, that's hilarious. Did you
so
tell them that?
Yeah, I did, yeah. So what they do is they give you a spinal. So it's
an epidural.
It's a bit like an epidural that women get when they're giving birth.
Right.
It's slightly different, but that's basically what it is. And that freezes the lower half of your body. You use the use of your legs. You're paralyzed, and there's no pain whatsoever. But then, because they regard the operation as the surgery as a kind of scary procedure, they then give you a massive dose of sedatives, and you kind of go off into dreamland. So I declined those. And they wouldn't actually let me look. They put some kind of curtain device between my face and my hip. But I heard the sawing.
Oh my!
And then I heard the hammering.
Oh my!
And I felt like a piece of furniture on a carpenter's bench. It was when I heard them talking. It was interesting. It was an interesting experience. But then very nice to come out of it, be fully awake afterwards, and gradually the feeling comes back to your legs. And I spent 4 days in hospital. And initially, I thought it was going to be very tough. And I thought I'd be on sticks for a long time, but I did the physio and I just carried on working at it, and I'm okay.
I stayed awake for my first knee surgery.
Right.
And while the guy was working, it was really weird because I was like half in it and half out of it.
Yeah.
And he was, he was just a guy that was like tired of being a doctor, or like really wasn't into people or whatever it was. I mean, he fixed my knee. It's still fixed to this day. It's a patella tendon graft where they take a slice of your patella and they open you up and take a piece of bone out of your shin and a piece of bone on your kneecap, and they use that to replace your anterior cruciate ligament.
Right.
And he puts it in there and like moves my leg around and goes, well, better than it was. That's what he said.
That's what he said.
Like I was awake.
Right.
Like I don't know if he just forgot I was awake or thought I wouldn't remember.
Yeah.
But I remember him moving around like, well, better than it was. like that's it. Not we've got it done.
Yeah.
A beautiful job. This young man will be up and walking in no time.
Just better than it was. That's the limit of his ambition.
His attitude was just like he didn't give a fuck. And I remember visiting him to get it looked at, like after, he would like want a checkup to see how it was like months later. He the guy just didn't like people. You could tell. He had this thing. It was just done. Done. There was no bedside manner. It was just he was courteous. He wasn't yelling at you or anything, but it was just
you were just another piece of meat on the table.
Yeah. It's weird to watch though, isn't it? Your body getting operated on.
It's a very strange experience to undergo.
Yeah.
In my sense, in my case, as I say, I was not able to watch it because they put up a curtain, but I heard it, and the particular things that I heard were sawing and hammering.
I saw it on a screen.
Right, I didn't.
I didn't watch it. I couldn't watch it in front of me, but I saw what was happening on screen.
Right.
It was crazy. It was really weird. They will open you up like a fish, but the hip replacement is a gigantic one. It's
a big surgery.
How is it 6 weeks later and you're walking around like you're great?
Well,
you didn't have a limp at all.
No, I guess in some ways I must have been reasonably fit. And got on,
That's good.
Got back.
That's very important.
Yeah,
because I know for folks that are like overweight or have issues already, they allow like a hip injury to let them get overweight.
Yeah,
that's a big rehabilitation.
It's a big thing, and it is major surgery. But
they chop the end of your bone off, right?
Yeah. So we're made in a way. Our bodies are like machines, and we got this ball and socket joint in the hip, and so the ball is on the end of the long bone, the femur, I think it is, and they chop that off. That comes off, okay, and then the socket. In my case, there were cysts in the socket, which were hollow spaces that had come in there because of the ball joint was out of kilter and it was rubbing in the wrong way, and this is why I was in severe pain for a year before this happened.
Wow.
And so they put in what they do is they put in a titanium unit there where the socket is. And they put a titanium shaft that they hammer down into the bone. Oh. But then on the top of the titanium is ceramic. So the actual bearings, both the titanium socket is lined with ceramic, and the bearing that moves around in it that sits on top of the titanium shaft, that's also ceramic. So there's no metal rubbing against metal, which has caused problems in the past. People get fragments of metal into their bloodstream and so on. Ceramic on ceramic bearings, and it's very good. It works well, and I'm not in pain, and that very bad period of not being able to walk more than a quarter of a mile without having to sit down and recover, that's all gone.
It's incredible. I mean, how long is it going to be before we have bionic bodies?
Well, it's already happening. We are already getting bionic bodies, and this is one of the good things. Which medical science has done some terrible things, but one of the good things it's done is I mean, if this had happened 50 years ago, I would have been crippled at the age of 62. I couldn't have gone on with my life.
That's what eventually did in Hunter Thompson.
Right.
He was in constant pain.
Pain.
Yeah, I believe he had hip replacement too, but it was like old school. You know, they didn't really.
Yeah, they've got a lot better.
A lot better. Yeah, that's the image right there. What we're looking at up on that screen.
There we go. Yeah.
Oh, God, Graham Hancock.
That's what happened to me.
Jesus Louises.
Yeah.
Woo!
It's a funny thing to look at it on the X-ray.
It's crazy. It's the idea that you're going to run around on that. That's a fake joint.
And, I asked him, when you hammer that titanium shaft down inside the bone, is there any danger that you can split the bone? And he said, yeah, sure. We sometimes split the bone. But he said, then we just bind it with wire.
Oh, my God. You just what? You fucking tied up with duct tape?
Yes, basically.
That's so crazy. They hammer a piece of metal into the center where the marrow is.
Where the marrow is, yeah.
Motherfucker.
Yeah.
Does it endanger the leg? Does it?
Apparently not. Apparently not.
That's incredible.
It's good stuff.
And then the body just absorbs the titanium, or
becomes part of the body. Bone tissue forms around as well, and you're all set.
And mates to it, right?
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
So I'm pleasantly surprised by the way that this has turned out. I thought I'm here in America now. I thought I would have to take sticks with me on this trip, but I haven't had to do so.
So you planned on taking sticks?
I did, but in the end I decided not to.
It's incredible. You're just walking around, totally normal. I don't want to. I have screws in both knees. I don't know why I'm so surprised, but I for whatever reason, a hip replacement seems like incredible.
Yeah, it's kind of intimate as well. It's right in the center of your being there.
It's right next to your junk. That's what
right
you're saying.
Next to your junk, yeah.
I mean, it's incredibly intimate. It feels, that's what it is. There's a vulnerability. It's inches away from your penis, and they're sawing.
Yeah.
Plus,
Jesus. Plus, I mean, since we're in the business of revelations here, they have to. The other thing that they have to do when you have the surgery for the 24 hours after the surgery is you have to have a catheter. through the penis and into
Right.
the bladder, because for those first 24 hours you cannot get up out of bed and you can't lift up to use a bedpan. So,
Right.
So they stick in a catheter. And,
Wow.
And I wanted that out as soon as possible. I wanted it out as soon as possible. I wanted to return to autonomy over my body
Yeah.
as quickly as possible. I did not want it to be subject to the whims or fancies of others. And I made a big fuss about this. I wanted the catheter out the next morning, and they said, and I literally was up on a Zimmer frame by midday the next day and hobbling to the toilet.
Wow. So how many days was it before you could walk?
So I was walking the very next day on a Zimmer frame. Yeah.
And they tell you to do this?
Yeah, you have to get going. You can't just sit there and do nothing. You got to get going. So I walked on a Zimmer frame, then I walked on two sticks, and then one stick. And
how long to one stick?
Oh, I only got rid of the one stick about 10 days ago.
Okay, so it was how long in before you could do one stick?
Let's say 4.5 weeks.
4.5 weeks you're just walking around with a cane?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Worth it.
Worth it. I'm very happy that I had it done and that I don't have to suffer the pain, because I had severe osteoarthritis. I don't know why. I mean, we all think we're young, but I feel young. I'm 62, and I don't know why I was afflicted with this at an age. Most people who go for hip replacement, they're into their 70s, So I don't know why it hit me so hard. I like the line from Raiders of the Lost Ark, where Indiana Jones is all beat up, sitting in the ship's cabin, and in some cabin, and the lady with him comments on his appearance, and he says, "It's not the years, it's the mileage." And I think I put on some mileage over the years.
Well, I know a lot of martial artists that get hip replacements.
Yes.
Mark Coleman, the former UFC heavyweight champion, just tweeted that he's going in for a hip replacement. He's already done it, and I believe Chuck Norris has had hip replacements. Right. It's very
all
common.
The impacts.
Yeah. And I have a buddy, my friend Shuki, who's a Muay Thai instructor. I believe he was in line for a hip replacement the last time I saw him. It's a weird joint. Sometimes
it's a weird joint. But the good news is, it's doable, and after a few weeks of pain and discomfort, you're back on your feet and fully functional. Unless the surgeon screws up, which they do sometimes.
I wonder about guys like Bo Jackson. He was a football player that was injured really badly, and he had to get a hip replacement, and it basically ended his career.
Right.
He was playing football and baseball at the same time. He was a super athlete, like incredible athlete. But if they could have fixed him with this back then, it seems like he could have continued playing
Probably
football.
Could have carried on.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Football with an artificial hip. But why should I be shocked? I mean, we have metal tubes that fly to other countries. Why should I be shocked that they can fix your hip?
Yeah. And what that comes down to is where your quality of life has deteriorated because of pain and immobility, you can recapture that. You can get your quality of life back, and that's what I value about it.
It's another place where cannabis is a beautiful drug. When you're injured, to just give you a sense of ease of your body.
Yeah.
It's for people that are in pain. People have back problems.
Cannabis is a wonderful,
it's incredible.
Thing.
Relaxes things.
I have to say that I did wonder, and I still do wonder, whether the fact that I quit cannabis in October 2011 and started feeling severe hip pain just 3 months later in the early part of 2012, whether there's some connection, or whether the cannabis was either in some way protecting me from the onset of severe osteoarthritis, or whether at least it was reducing my sensitivity to the pain of the osteoarthritis, because that's when I started noticing it.
So your body was just out of alignment? The hip was out of socket or something? It was wearing in a funny way?
Yeah, it was wearing in a funny way. It seemed that that ball socket joint was not quite the right shape, and
it's just a natural
some kind of natural thing. Yeah.
When you talked about the ayahuasca experience, and you talked about the goddess coming to you, and that you choose to believe that it's real, my thoughts on this whole what is real and what is not real thing, what I've been thinking lately is that it doesn't really even matter.
Yeah.
Because what it is it's about the experience itself. And the best parts of psychedelic experiences are the learning parts. It sounds like so boring to people because they think like, oh no, I thought I was going to see amazing things and I was going to watch elephants fly and it was going to be, mad hallucinations, which does occur sometimes, but that's not what it's really about. What it's really about is about a learning experience. It's about massive leaps in development of your personality and your psyche, your worldview, your personal view. And these massive leaps that happen through psychedelics, they happen exactly the same way if you really do encounter a goddess or if this goddess is just conjured up by your imagination in incredibly vivid detail. Either one is the same experience to you personally.
Yeah. I think that's a very important point.
It's a very important point because, yes, it might be a hallucination, but it is immensely beneficial. Or it might not be a hallucination, and we might not have a full account of what the fuck goes on in the human consciousness, especially during altered states.
Absolutely.
And to go one way or the other, I think, is absurd.
We don't need to do that.
We don't need to, and we don't know.
Here is an incredibly valuable experience.
Yes.
Which is available to us, and which, let's not forget, that humanity has had a long relationship with these plants. This is one of the problems, again, caused by the war on drugs, which is that it sought to intervene in that relationship and demonize and make it dangerous to use them because you might get sent to prison. You can get sent to prison for a very long time. People live in fear. What we need is a nurturing society which makes it possible for people to have these experiences in the safest, most loving environment. The love is key. If you're feeling threatened in your head at a particular time, if you're in a space that is uncomfortable or difficult for you, the chances are the psychedelic experience will also be uncomfortable and difficult. The more that you can control the space, the more that you can be surrounded by others who love you and have your best interests at heart, the more likely you are to have a very beneficial experience from that. And those beneficial experiences can and frequently do include painful moments when you come to realization of actually who you are and what you are. This is, I mean, it's absolutely fundamental with ayahuasca, is what I call the life review, where you see the impact of your behavior on others, which previously you had insulated yourself from. And when you see the pain you'd caused, you might have felt perfectly justified at the time. When you see it, and you see it with that clarity, it makes you strongly motivated not to do that again.
Yeah.
So it's a very important learning experience. They call them plant teachers. They call them teachers in the Amazon.
That aspect, that learning from your past mistake aspects exists in a lot of psychedelics. It's a core factor of psychedelics.
I would say it's a core factor of all psychedelics.
And I always felt like it's really ironic that law enforcement works against psychedelics because nothing would benefit law enforcement more than psychedelics.
Absolutely.
If psychedelics were legal, there'd be so many less crimes.
So many less crimes.
First of all, the drug crimes would be out the door, and then it would be a matter of how many people are on mushrooms going to rob your house. How about zero?
Exactly.
You know, I mean, they would ask you for food if they were that starving.
Yeah.
I just think that we have this incredible ally that our culture, our society, we have this amazing plant thing that we've discovered in several different forms.
Yeah.
And we've made all of them outside of our reach. We put all of them outside legal reach, which is insane. It's insane.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what's going on. I mean, why is society on this self-destructive trip right now?
They're ignorant. It's essentially, I believe, and it sounds crazy, but I believe this. I believe that psychedelics are here for human beings to move to the next level of consciousness, and they can elevate us away from our warlike ways.
I'm with you on that.
I think it's the only thing. The only thing. I don't think ideology, morality shifts with understanding, with the exchange of information. I think morality escalates slowly but surely all throughout culture, and eventually we may get to a term or a time in the future where we're not warlike at all.
Yeah.
But the best way to do that is through psychedelics.
Psychedelics can help,
and the people who are involved in the running of things most likely are ignorant to the experience. And so what you're dealing with is someone who is 50, 60 years into a lifelong, closed-off ego trip of death and destruction, and they're the ones that are running the world.
Unfortunately, they're the ones that are running the world.
That's why we're so fucked. We're not so fucked because humans are evil. And when you look around at all the nice people that you meet, you get really confused as to how the world can be so fucked up.
How can it be so fucked up?
Because
when people are basically good.
Yeah, most people are good, but the people that are running shit, most of them are not good.
And they get like into personality types. Like, I mean, if you want to run shit, then right there you've got a certain kind of personality.
Yeah, anybody that wants to be president should not be allowed to be president.
Exactly. There should be an instant disqualification. You know, you should be absolutely not wanting that job.
It should be like the lottery. You know, like you should like the public. Like a new president comes in every month. You know, and if you do a good job, you know, you get to keep. People get to vote whether they keep you for a few months.
Yeah.
And it's just a person. Just you have random qualifications as far as education, as far as your background.
Not some power-hungry egomaniac who wants to push you around, which is unfortunately the case.
And the old boy network, the thing that comes into place when these guys, they're cronies, and they all help each other out and hook each other up and communicate with each other. And then there's lobbyists and special interest groups, and they all want to make sure that this keeps going, so they make sure that the laws continue to stay on the books, that allow them to do all the stupidity, especially when like Congress can't be guilty of insider trading.
Right.
Have you seen that?
I didn't see that. No.
Oh, let me Google that because I want to make sure that I'm correct. Congress not guilty of insider trading. I think you can't accuse them of insider trading.
Oh dear.
Yeah, oh dear is the right way to say that. Let me Google that to make sure that that's true. Congress.
So basically, they get immunity.
Yeah. Hold on. I wrote it wrong. Can't be guilty. Immune to insider trading? Let's try immune. Yeah, there's something. I'm looking at some articles on this here.
Well, politicians are always cutting themselves all the slack there is, you know.
That is exactly what it is. Congress believes they're immune to insider trading laws, and there are legal professors that are debating them. And the legal analysis by law professor Donna Nagley of the Indiana University suggests that members of Congress may not be immune to insider trading laws after all. Apparently there's a 60 Minutes piece where they went on about this. So it's one of those legal things where apparently there's probably you have to go over it with a fine-tooth comb and then find out what exactly how it's written. It's all craziness.
A bunch of corrupt bastards.
Crazy fucks.
You know, that's it. They want to do that job because they like controlling other people.
But just the fact that they could say that they don't want to be prosecuted for insider trading, it's like, why is that? How much are you doing? How much insider? Guess what? You can come to me all day and you say, hey, Joe, do you think that insider trading should be illegal? And I'll say yes.
Yeah.
And if I do insider trading, prosecute me.
Yeah.
But if I'm coming out saying, I don't want you to prosecute me for insider trading.
You definitely got something to hide.
Yeah, you got to be like, what the fuck are you doing, man?
Yeah.
That's why you want to be a congressman, so you can just profit off of the stock market, you creep.
So I thought, and I've made this proposal several times, that what I would like to see is anybody running for high office, they first right off they got to do 10 ayahuasca sessions.
It's a great idea.
You know, that's it. That's the first hurdle. They got to do that. They got to go through it, and we'll see how they feel afterwards. Could be 10, strong mushroom sessions. That would be just as good. But they got to be able to do that.
You know what's really crazy? The solution exists to a better world. It exists. It exists right here. It's not like imagine if some benevolent race from another planet came down here and gifted us with some space fruit. And if we eat the space fruit, we'll see ourselves for who we truly are, and we'll recognize our potential.
Which many people hold, they're letting go of their responsibility for their own lives.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, but if you told people that you would go, wow, that would be great, but it's science fiction.
Yeah.
Well, the exact thing exists with ayahuasca, with psychedelic mushrooms.
That's true.
It exists. Yeah. And for whatever reason, discussing it is a very controversial thing.
Very controversial.
It's very controversial. Like I've had producers ask me why are you talking about TV shows that I'm working on? Why are you talking about illegal drugs? I'm like,
I've been asked to stay away from those subjects.
Of course, don't talk. You're gonna fuck up this whole thing. Yeah. This ancient archaeology. I think you're onto something, Graham. I think you've done some good work. But leave the mushrooms out, buddy.
Exactly.
Come on.
I've had that conversation.
Come on, Graham. You don't need the mushrooms. We're making some money over here, Graham.
Yeah.
Yeah, it exists.
And I think that was part of the problem with my TED Talk, too.
Yeah. We could live in a Narnia world. We could live in a world like Avatar. If everybody was doing ayahuasca, we could pull this world together with a rapid quickness.
Yeah.
If they just broke out ayahuasca ceremonies all over the globe, if it became the next big thing, sort of like cell phones.
Yeah.
Everybody's got ayahuasca ceremonies on every corner.
Yeah.
You could change the whole world within our lifetime in an astounding, loving way,
I believe
where
that.
people would abandon so many of their ideas about business and so many of their ideas about controlling resources and killing people. And
You know, the amazing thing is that it is actually happening. It is actually happening, admittedly on a small scale. But for me, this is one of the mysteries of ayahuasca at a time when the Amazon jungle is under such terrible threat, that out of the jungle emerge these two plants, one of which is a vine, which then begins to spread her tentacles all around the planet and to call out to people. And people are drawn to ayahuasca. I can't tell you how often I get asked, where do I go for a good ayahuasca ceremony where I know I can trust the shaman? Again and again, it's happening everywhere. It's happening in Japan. It's happening in America. It's happening in Germany. It's happening all over the world. And so you get a small but growing group of initiates who have had this shared experience, and we kind of know each other when we meet.
And the initiates that have had this experience are talking about it, and more are coming.
Exactly.
It's building and building, and the ayahuasca tourism in South America is gigantic now. So it's really
It's gigantic, and a number of times I stand up and I'm giving a presentation somewhere, and I'm talking about ayahuasca, and then somebody stands up in the audience and says, "Don't you realize that by promoting ayahuasca, you're leading to the depletion of the rainforest?" Quite the opposite is the case. What's happened with ayahuasca is that ayahuasca is being massively planted in the rainforest now because of ayahuasca tourism. Ayahuasca tourism is a really good thing for ayahuasca. It's not causing any depletion, and ayahuasca can be grown in many different parts of the world, and it is being grown. That's the vine.
It's a fascinating subject. The fact that something does exist to give you that experience.
Yeah.
I've always said about the DMT experience that, like, if you could just show someone like what you see, without taking it, if you could just show someone, they would want to do it. They would want to go, wait a minute, and it doesn't hurt you? Like, no, it doesn't hurt you. You're not going to get hurt. But most people probably shouldn't do it, though. That's what I think. Also,
Well, I think
we
even
need
if
baby steps.
Yeah, if we lived in that ideal world where we as adults had the right to make sovereign decisions about our own consciousness, I think most people wouldn't choose to do it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, if you look at how it is in Holland, where marijuana is essentially legal, and nobody, they look down upon people that get high all the time, and they also look down upon hard drugs because of the fact that you can get most things. They understand with great clarity what's dangerous and what's not dangerous, and people are always going to make bad mistakes.
That's it. You just have to treat people as adults, and you have to understand that some people will make mistakes, and there will be problems. But that should not be an obstacle to what has to be a fundamental freedom.
But what about allowing people into your community that sell them? Allowing people in your community of friends and neighbors that profit off of the addiction of others, because there's certain drugs like meth.
I agree.
Like, I'm not saying that meth should be illegal. Like, I don't know whether or not. I don't know whether or not there's a way to handle it where you get the maximum benefit. I don't know whether it's making it illegal, decriminalizing it, making it so that people can't get prosecuted for using, but they can get prosecuted for selling.
It's a complicated area.
Yeah.
Some of these substances are very harmful. Personally, I don't want to smoke meth.
But if you were next door to a meth guy, like, you would not want that guy in your community. He's profiting off of enslaving people, chemically enslaving people.
So this is an area where more work has to be done. But I think if we approach the problem from a spirit of love and from a spirit of respect for the sovereignty of other adults, it'll be a whole lot better than the way we're approaching the problem right now. And as we know, making these toxic substances illegal doesn't prevent their use. It absolutely does not prevent their use. The use has gone up and up and up and up and up over the decades.
And it's kind of unique. One of the properties of psychedelics, whether it's like some folks, ibogaine has a great result for curing addictions, and ayahuasca has a great result. And the people that are doing these very things and selling these very drugs, both participating in both sides, selling and dealing, could both benefit from ayahuasca.
Sure.
Like if you're a meth dealer, you're an asshole.
Yeah.
Like what an asshole. You're selling something that fucking kills people,
Yeah.
makes them pull their skin off of their
Yeah.
face.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
One of the first ayahuasca sessions that I went to in Brazil, there was a guy there from LA who was a heavy smoker of crystal meth.
Oh, Jesus.
And he came there in a state, he was just so wired. And it came out as we were discussing, as we were talking, it came out that he had a rival in love, and he'd gone out and got a gun, and just before he left LA, the best decision he ever made was to leave LA and come down to Brazil and drink ayahuasca. He was getting close to the point of murdering a fellow human being.
Wow.
2 weeks in Brazil, 5 ayahuasca sessions, completely turned him around. And he revolutionized his life.
It's incredible.
And he became such a loving, positive, warm-spirited person, and all his anger was gone, and he moved on in his life in amazing ways. And I've seen many, 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 many examples of that. I don't want to pretend, however, that it's all sweetness and light in the garden. There are problems also with ayahuasca, and people should be aware of this. There are shamans who are abusing their power. There are, if you go to a place like Iquitos in Peru, you'll find there's 2 types of shamans. One type are the curanderos, they're the healers. The other type are the brujos, they're sorcerers, actually. And they will use ayahuasca to gain power over others. And there have been 1 or 2 horrendous cases that occur with this. So I do think the intention of the individuals who are involved is also an important part of this. And psychedelics, I agree with you that the single one-stop shop to transform our society and make it a better place, a far better place than it can be today, is the correct use of psychedelics. But I would be wrong to say that psychedelics are a magic potion, because they're not. And there have been societies which have misused psychedelics profoundly. I would say that the Aztecs in Mexico were one of those.
What did they do?
Well, they used psilocybin, but they did not use it for gentle consciousness exploration. The Aztecs used psilocybin preparatory to rituals of human sacrifice. The Aztecs used psilocybin as a vehicle to communicate with their deities, and those deities included characters like Huitzilopochtli, who was the war god, who spoke to Montezuma was the last Aztec emperor, and that's 1519. When Cortez appears in Mexico, and Montezuma was in daily communication with the war god by means of psilocybin mushrooms, and what the war god was telling him to do, there's demons out there as well as angels. What the war god was telling him to do was to kill people and to stretch them over a stone and cut out their hearts. And there was a horrendous situation in Tenochtitlan, which was the capital city, which is now Mexico City, as a matter of fact, when they inaugurated the Great Pyramid. Reliable accounts, 80,000 people were sacrificed to the god of war.
In 4 days.
80,000 people. Now, this is a bloody awful thing that was going on there, and psychedelics were involved. I'm not saying that psychedelics caused it. And again, we come to this issue. Are these entities that we encounter projections of our own minds? Or is there some other realm or level of existence where non-physical entities that communicate with us at the level of consciousness exist? Whichever it is, whether it's a projection of our own minds, as you rightly say, or whether those entities are real, is less important than the effects on our behavior. But if what is being projected from our own mind is very dark and negative and wicked, or if those entities also include evil angels as well as good guys, then you can get cultures misled down this path, and I do believe that's what happened with the Aztecs. There's also recently, and again, I think truth is really important. Truth is really important, so let's be truthful about this also. There have been some tragic cases with ayahuasca, most recently in Chile, which actually involved a human sacrifice, which actually involved the burning to death of a baby on the instructions of the so-called guru or shaman. He'd formed a kind of death cult, but their sacrament was ayahuasca. This is very rare, but it does happen, and I think people should be aware when they enter ayahuasca space that one of the things ayahuasca does is it makes you more suggestible. It opens your heart. If a powerful, strong, negative personality comes along and says to you, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, you might just do it. And that is also there possible. So you have to be strong in yourself. You have to be clear on your intent. And if you're not going into this with good intent, then bad things also can happen.
Well, I would also wonder what would it be like to introduce psychedelics into the insane warlike environment of Aztec Mexico in the 1500s. I mean, what would it have been like this living back then, and what would it take to become a person of royalty, an emperor, a king? In those days, it was insane bloodshed.
Insane bloodshed.
They were
a very dark and demonic culture, and unfortunately, that demonic aspect of Aztec culture was, without any shadow of a doubt, mediated by psilocybin mushrooms, and they called them teonanactil, which means the flesh of the gods, and they were used for communication with demonic entities, and we cannot pretend that was not so. Mm-hmm. This was the case, and indeed, if the Aztecs had not been those people who murdered their neighbors, who used their neighbors as a sort of farm. I mean, if you imagine a society which was run by serial killers and in the interests of serial killers, that's roughly Aztec society in 1519. So they would have neighboring tribes who they would prey on. They could easily have completely defeated them, but they preferred not to completely defeat them. They preferred to use them for warfare every year, make war on them, take captives, bring the captives back to Tenochtitlan, and cut out their hearts. And this is why there's karma. There's such a thing as karma. This is why Montezuma was brought down. I mean, 490 Spaniards turn up on the coast of Mexico and destroy a standing army of 200,000 men. Why does that happen? It happened because the neighbors of the Aztecs hated the Aztecs. They utterly hated them. And they were looking for liberation from that horror that was being inflicted on them.
Well, isn't that a better, I shouldn't say a better, but isn't a possibility that what you're dealing with is a bunch of sociopaths and a bunch of crazy people, and if you introduce psilocybin into their system in this insane warlike world, that what you're conjuring up is their imagination.
Yeah,
and it is the inner. I mean, the desire to manifest these things that would ask them to do horrible things.
Yeah.
This is a core behavior pattern in human beings when they get in control of armies.
Yes, yeah, it is. Yeah.
Absolute, complete, total ruthlessness. Barbaric behavior is not only is it beneficial, but it's necessary.
It's applauded.
Yeah, it's applauded. It's necessary.
And it wins you medals.
And if you don't do it, someone around you is going to do it, so you have to do it.
Yeah. So there's the interesting question right there. I mean, we have armies now in the world today, which are going out doing murderous stuff.
Right.
And so the question is, if we were to be in such a position that we could massively introduce psychedelics into those armies, would it actually make them worse or better? I'm not sure what the answer is. You know, I'm not sure what.
It's very honest of you to not be sure, and that is I think. There's no way to be sure. We know that the Vikings they berserkered on mushrooms.
They were using,
was it Amanita muscaria they took?
Muscaria,
yeah. I never had much luck with that.
Me neither.
Yeah, that's what I hear from a lot of people.
Me neither. So it
felt weird.
If you want to have luck with it, you've got to pass it through
urine.
You've got to pass it through a reindeer or through the bladder of a shaman.
Yeah.
Then it'll work, you know.
Oh, how convenient. You have to drink shaman piss.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the thing that they always say. You have to recycle your urine. I'm like,
it's as though the body functions as a filter.
Yeah.
And it removes certain impurities, which then allow the good stuff to remain, and that comes through in urine. And apparently you can pass it through 7 human bodies. It doesn't lose.
Hey, easy. I know a buddy who did it. He was on mushrooms, and they told him to drink his urine. He's like, I am so high right now. I do not need to drink my urine. And they're like, trust me, drink your urine. And he said he drank his urine. It was like just getting shot through a cyclone.
Right.
Boom! He said the whole thing just took some incredible path.
Yeah.
from drinking his own urine.
Yeah, I must say that's not an experience I've had or would welcome, but that's what the research shows.
I have drunk my own urine on several occasions.
Have you?
Yeah, just to see, because I read about urine therapy, so I wanted to find out what it was about.
It's a big thing in India.
Does it really make you feel better when you're sick? Yeah. And it did work, but it might have been placebo. Yeah. I don't know. But there was one time when I was sick and I took it. I called my friend Jan up and I'm like, dude, I drank my own piss and it worked. It was crazy because he was like big on it, he's big on urine therapy.
Does
and
it taste okay?
Stuff. It doesn't taste nearly as bad as you would think it tastes.
Okay.
The idea is a lot worse than the actual reality of the urine.
The idea is hard to grasp.
Yeah, but it's just like warm water. It's not horrific tasting. You gag a little when you smell it. You're like, I can't believe I'm going to drink this. But once you're actually drinking it, it's not that big a deal. I haven't done it in a long time. I don't want to say like Lyoto Machida, who's a famous UFC fighter. He drinks his own urine every morning.
Okay.
And there's another guy, Juan Manuel Marquez, a famous boxer from Mexico. Same thing. Yeah. Was drinking his own. I think he quit. He gave up.
If you're going to do that, you might as well have some Amanita muscaria in there.
Yeah, you might as well. And even then, yeah. I wonder if when a person goes completely psycho, when you're living in war, and one of the things about the Mexicans, the Aztecs, rather, is I don't even think they had horses yet.
No, they didn't. This is one of the reasons, again, why a relatively small force of Spaniards were able to defeat them.
Yeah.
Was because the horse had been extinct in the Americas for 12,000 years.
Wow.
From the end of the last ice age. And
I want to get to Egypt because I think it's one of the most bizarre accomplishments of human beings. And the age of Egypt is a fascinating piece of discussion because whatever it is, one of the more fascinating things is Robert Schoch out of Boston University, the geologist who examined the erosion in the Temple of the Sphinx and determined it to be thousands of years of rainfall, and which would predate the Sphinx by quite a bit. Because this is all stone that had been moved by human beings, and it had been used to construct the Sphinx. And this temple, the Sphinx, had been carved out. It's very clear that it was carved out. And you see these massive fissures that look exactly like water erosion. He specifically said that he showed these images to other geologists without telling them what they were looking at. And they almost unanimously said that it was water erosion over thousands of years of rainfall. And then when he would show them exactly what he was telling them to describe, then they didn't want to have any part of it because it's like, okay, now you're saying something that's really crazy because now you're saying that this structure is 11,000 years old as opposed to, 4,500 years old.
Surprise, surprise, I'm going to disagree with you.
Shall we look at...
Well, it's not me. It's Robert Schoch.
No, Robert Schoch.
Shall we look at some images of the Sphinx? And its
Let's look at images of the water erosion because it's...
And then I'll show some images of the quarries nearby.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Sure.
So if you could hook me up again, Jamie, to the HDMI. And again, credit to my wife, Santa, who has taken every risk with me, every step, every dive for the last 30 plus years. This is her aerial photograph of the Sphinx enclosure and of the Sphinx temple, so-called.
How'd she get that picture?
In a helicopter.
Wow.
Huh. Back in, the mid-90s somewhere. Sphinx temple directly in front of the Sphinx, so-called, and the Valley temple to the left as we view it. And you can see that the Sphinx is a rock-hewn structure cut out of the bedrock with a trench around it. And if we go in here, the notion that the Sphinx bears the marks of precipitation-induced weathering is an evolution of an idea that the late, great John Anthony West had many, many years ago. You've had John on your show before he passed away. Yeah. He was a dear friend of mine.
He was great. Magical Egypt, I can't recommend it enough. It's such a fascinating material. He has two of them, two series. I think there's like 3 DVDs in each one, and it's just incredible stuff. Just on the undisputable things about the construction methods and how fascinating it is that they built these things.
Marvelous, out-of-the-box thinker. I miss him so much. He was a dear
amazing
friend. It was he who brought Robert Schoch to the Giza Plateau. And Robert took a look at the erosion around the Sphinx and eventually came to the conclusion that the best explanation for it was that this Sphinx enclosure had been subjected to at least 1,000 years of extremely heavy rainfall. And Robert Schoch right now puts that back to around the 10,000 BC date, 12,000 plus years ago, during the Younger Dryas, when indeed there were heavy rains in Egypt. And it's these deep vertical fissures in the side of the enclosure wall which most clearly demonstrate what he's talking about, that rainwater pouring off the edge of the plateau would have selectively cut out the softer areas of rock and created these fissures that we see through it, and this rounded, scalloped profile in Robert Schoch's view and in mine.
I've had Robert Schoch on as well.
Yeah.
We talked about it for a long time.
And I want to pay tribute to Robert Schoch here. He and I have had our differences, but Robert Schoch, in my view, is a hero. Robert Schoch is a mainstream academic who has stuck his neck out for an idea that is very unpopular with mainstream academics. He's taken all the risks for his career, he's put himself out there, and he's spoken his truth. And I want to respect Robert Schoch. I want to express that respect, and kudos to Robert Schoch for everything he's done. He's helped to advance this field enormously and to allow people to think previously unthinkable thoughts.
And I've seen him attacked mercilessly.
Mercilessly. This happens again and again with archaeologists, unfortunately.
So
Now, I'll just complete this point, because it's often said that the Sphinx was the work of the pharaoh Khafre, and that these two temples were the work of the pharaoh Khafre, particularly the Valley Temple that we see on the right there. There's no inscriptions in the Sphinx temple, but when we come to the Valley Temple, what we're looking at is a limestone core, and those limestone blocks were actually taken out of the Sphinx trench, which was then faced in a later time with granite. And there's a quote from Robert Schoch there, who's saying that basically the original temples were limestone, and that they were faced with granite. Now, that's the interior of the temple. You can see that there's definitely two phases of construction there. There's the granite, no dispute that that's Old Kingdom Egypt. And then there's the limestone massive megalithic walls behind it, which are heavily eroded, as you can see even from here. Now, interestingly, is that temple really associated with the pharaoh Khafre? In 1947, I.E.S. Edwards, who was one of the leading Egyptologists of his time, wrote this: "Around each doorway is a band of hieroglyphic inscription giving the name and titles of the king. No other inscriptions or relief occur anywhere else in the building." That's been taken to assume that the name of the king was given as Khafre. Actually, Edwards corrected himself in 1993. Around each doorway was carved a band of hieroglyphic inscription giving the name and titles of the king, but only the last words, "beloved of the goddess Bastet" and "beloved of the goddess Hathor," are preserved. No other inscriptions occur anywhere else in the building. In other words, there's nothing in that temple that directly connects it to the pharaoh Khafre. But what's interesting is the way that granite facing, which certainly was done in the Old Kingdom, has actually been, the interior of the granite has actually been cut to match the heavily weathered limestone that it's covering. It's been cut to shape that. They're honoring and respecting that ancient structure. And so, in my opinion, the geological evidence on the antiquity of the Sphinx is strong. There's no doubt that the ancient Egyptians were there, that they did work on the Sphinx. The head of the Sphinx was recarved into a human head. I and my colleagues believe it was originally the head of a lion, that the Sphinx was an entire lion.
But the evidence that it's been carved is that it has far less erosion than the rest of the body, correct?
And also the head is way out of proportion
Right.
to the rest of the body. That's an issue, because one thing the ancient Egyptians were pretty good at when they put their minds to it was proportion.
Yeah.
And the disproportionate size of the head of the Sphinx in relation to the whole body of the Sphinx.
I mean, if you look at other ancient Egyptian sphinxes, they also have small heads. If you put my head on a lion, it would look small. And they all look relatively small.
Indeed, it would look small. That's the point. It was a lion before, and it was cut. It was heavily eroded, and it was then cut down into a human head.
But it does have a distinctly different form of erosion.
No, that's actually where I'd come and disagree with you. I have some photos as well.
What's your
But it looks
evidence that
way
it was
less
connected
eroded.
to Khafre?
The head. Oh, yeah, and
the
I can
head
show you
looks
why.
way
Yeah,
less
because
eroded.
it's a different stratum of the natural limestone.
I see.
So if you look at the geology of the area, are you finished, Graham? If not, I'll put up some slides.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, let's do this. So first off, I want to sort of show this is what it looks like, even the neck. You don't see the neck today because because they expanded the headdress as a support for the head. And so the point is that there's these different layers of this limestone here that we can understand geologically. And so there's this very dense limestone that's up by the head, and then the rest of the limestone is much more fragile and porous. So I do want to be clear, how do we date the Sphinx? What kind of evidence archaeologically are we using? And so what that comes from is largely radiocarbon dates from the pyramids themselves. So pieces of wood that were in between the blocks of the pyramids have been radiocarbon dated and definitively tell us that the pyramids were built during the Old Kingdom, right?
But didn't they do work on the pyramids at multiple stages where they would probably like reseal things and surface things and clean things? If they were constructed 12, 13, 20,000 years ago and people were still inhabiting them 5,000 years ago, wouldn't it make sense that they would do things to them?
Well, we have inscriptions in there from areas that are sealed off from the actual construction, graffiti from the workmen referring to, for example, Friends of Khufu and different workmen gangs that are in there. And these are in areas...
It's graffiti like they tagged
You know
Yeah,
that-
they tagged it, exactly.
You know
and
that,
these
that,
are,
that particular graffiti in the Khufu cartouche has long been suggested as a forgery by Howard Vyse.
except it uses versions of Khufu's name that were not known until later by scholars. And so that's
What versions of those?
I don't know, man.
Ah.
I don't read hieroglyphs. I
Where'd you
read
get that information?
Egyptologists.
Where'd you get that information from?
I got that.
Zawi Hawass.
No, not from Zahi Hawass. I've never met Zahi Hawass. I got that information from reading, man. But okay, so let's go back. How do we know that these radiocarbon dates with the blocks in the pyramid relate to the Sphinx itself? Because the Sphinx is just hewn out of natural stone, right? These different layers here. So the reason we know is because geochemists have done stone sourcing on the chemistry of these stones in the pyramids. And they've been able to trace them to different quarries at Giza. And so this is photos of different quarries and cuttings for the quarries. And so they've taken samples from the quarries themselves and from the stones in the pyramids. They do different kinds of geochemical analyses to show the ratios of, in this case, magnesium and iron. And then they trace them back to specific quarries there. And so they know that a bunch of the stones from Khafre, for example, come from the area of the Sphinx. The Sphinx is from a quarry. It's a quarry site for those stones. And so one of the things...
Go back to that slide for a second.
Yeah.
We're cut into the quarry walls. Okay.
And so this is a photo of some of these quarries, and I want to point out that the quarry walls look a lot like exactly the walls of the Sphinx itself. It has the same kind of erosion on it. It has the same kind of rough working on it. And so what you're actually seeing with the Sphinx is you're seeing this roughened shape from quarrying, which is then built with nicer stones around it.
Right, but we're talking about the temple, the Sphinx, the outside structures, what Robert Schoch was discussing. That shows much more clear indication of the water erosion. Not necessarily this, which shows a lot of kind of different erosion.
And by the way, this restoration on the paws of the Sphinx is modern.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is
Yeah,
modern.
that's
I'm not going to deny
Why
that.
do
But
they
what
do
I'm
that?
trying to explain to you is that we can't... A, I don't think that anybody really agrees with Schoch that it is erosion. B, if it
Well, you
is
can't say
erosion, a lot of geologists do not, nor do
But many
Egyptologists.
geologists do. Many
Very
geologists do
few,
agree with them.
Very few.
I think it's quite a bit.
I
Graham,
don't
you would
know.
know more than I do.
I think it's quite a bit too, but it doesn't really matter to me. I think whether geologists agree with him or not, whether archaeologists agree with him or not, he's spoken his truth, he's made his case, and I think it's a strong and compelling case.
And what I'm trying to do is present the evidence that goes against him, right?
But when you look at those fissures that are in that wall,
You see the same thing on quarries there. You know, it's the same exact kind of fissures on this is just a completely different quarry in a different area of Giza.
that's not the most specific example of it, though. If you could show other examples of that wall.
And so, I mean,
There's
well,
other examples of that wall that are much more rounded out.
So I
and
have
they
been to
dip
Giza, by
in.
the way.
See, this just doesn't look the same to me.
Wait, but I have a reason for saying that. I've been to
Okay.
Giza. The one time I went to Giza, it rained. In fact, the taxi got into an accident because the oil on the road got so slick that we were hit from behind.
Right, it does rain.
Very minor fender bender, but the
Right,
point
but you're
is,
not denying
but
that
how
the
do you,
climate
how do you
radically
date,
changed in
How
that
do you
area.
date erosion like this? That takes a lot of experimentation, and I've seen no evidence that shows how to date this kind of erosion to 12,000 years ago or something
Are
like
you
that.
in control of the thing now? Is that what's
I
going
am,
on?
and I was going to show
Graham,
some...
can you show images from what you were looking at when it shows the water erosion? Because
Sure.
it looks very different. The images that Graham was showing from where Robert Schoch did his work, it's much more extreme. The ones that you have are from a distance, and the other ones are kind of blurry, and you're looking at it, and it looks similar. But like
I was
that,
there in 2003, so it's been
I'm
a
sure
long
you
time.
were. I'm sure you were. But this is different. the fissures in there are different. They really look like water flow. And if you're talking about the different layers of stone, which are softer in some layers and harder in other, if you did have that kind of water flowing through it, it would make sense that the softer layers would be more eroded. And that's Robert Schoch's contention.
And how are you going to date that, though, to however long ago? One of the other key
But don't you date it though? But don't you date it though by the amount of rainfall that we know took place at a certain time?
Because a small amount of rainfall can also cause erosion, especially in a dry environment. So in very dry environments, a tiny amount of rainfall can actually damage things even worse because things are so dry.
But that level of erosion?
Well, but you need to come up with some independent way of dating it, right? And that's where the issue is. What we do have is independent confirmation that the blocks in the pyramids came from the quarry right there.
Right.
And we have dates on those blocks from radiocarbon dates of wood in between those blocks.
There's an area where my work is misunderstood. I strongly support Robert Schoch on the 12,000-year-old dating of the Sphinx and of the megalithic temples in front of the Sphinx. I've never claimed that the pyramids are 12,000 years old.
Oh, I know it didn't say you have.
I didn't say you did
I know some
either.
people do, though.
Yeah.
Some people do.
Yeah, some people do.
I've never claimed that. I do not seek to divorce the ancient
That is
Egyptians
why I brought up
from
the
Great
notion
Pyramids.
that they'd been resurfaced, because that's the claim.
Yeah, I've heard that claim as
That
well.
people had been living in them for thousands of years, and so that the material that you're dating is from that time period.
Yeah.
And our fears that you were just discussing earlier about how soft we are in comparison to the past civilizations in terms of like our ability to live off the land, that's one aspect that bothers me. But one of the big ones that bothers me is the fact that everything is digital. All of our information is stored on hard drives.
You bet.
And if that goes down, there's not much left. You have paper books and a few thousands of years. Imagine what would be left.
Yeah,
we would lose all of our advancement.
Well, I can speak to this at a personal level. There was a time when I was an excellent map reader. I could navigate anywhere with maps. My wife Santha and I did huge journeys in Mexico back in the early 1990s in really cheap hire cars with maps, and we found our way everywhere without any problem. Today, I can hardly use a map. The skill of using a map has lapsed within me. Why? Because of GPS. GPS technology has come along, and it always tells me where I am. And being a bit lazy, I just accept that technology. But then I had cause to ask myself this just the other day: supposing all those satellites go down and there's no GPS, is the whole industrialized human race is going to suddenly be lost? All those Uber drivers who don't know their way from A to B and who rely entirely on their GPSs, they won't know where they're going. And it's true with digital data. The digital data, unlike print data, is very fragile and requires programs in order to access and interpret it that are much more complicated than simply cracking the code of a lost language.
I mean, the programs vary between different phone platforms.
Exactly.
They vary in computer platforms.
Yeah.
It's so fragile, and it's so, I don't know if there's any precautions that have been taken place to preserve this information in case of, like what Robert Schoch described, coronal mass ejection or something crazy.
Take down all the satellites.
Yeah.
No, I don't think preparation has been made, and and it's very clear that preparation is not being made for the risk of another cosmic impact. And again, a point that I'd like to make about this is that we are, in a sense, in a place where history can repeat itself, that there are certain cycles at work. The work on the comet impact 12,800 years ago has very clearly and specifically identified the debris trail of that comet. And that debris trail is the Taurid meteor stream. And it's called the Taurid meteor stream because it appears to emanate from the region of the sky in which the constellation of Taurus sits. It doesn't. It's within our solar system. It's an optical illusion. The Taurid meteor stream is a giant complex of debris. It is 30 million kilometers wide. What you had was an original comet that might have been 100 to 200 kilometers in diameter, a small moon, which fragmented and broke up into multiple parts. And those parts began to spread out along the whole orbit of the Taurid meteor stream and to widen. The whole thing widened, so it's like a giant tube of debris. And the evidence and the argument is that 12,800 years ago, several large bits of that debris fell out of the Taurid meteor stream and impacted with the Earth. The problem is that the Taurid meteor stream still exists, and our planet still passes through it twice a year. And those passages take place in June and in November, and each passage takes 12 and a half days. And the same group of scientists who are looking at the evidence for the impacts 12,800 years ago are deeply concerned that we may face future impacts from the Taurid meteor stream, that there are still large objects up there. This is not theory, this is a fact. There's a comet up there called Comet Encke, which is part of the Taurid meteor stream. It's a large fragment of the original giant comet. Comet Encke has a diameter of, 5 or 6 kilometers. There's 19 recognized huge objects within the Taurid meteor stream. Calculations indicate that there may be as much as 200 asteroids within the Taurid meteor stream of a diameter of a kilometer or more, which would have catastrophic effect if they hit the Earth. And responsible astronomers regard the Taurid meteor stream as the greatest collision hazard facing mankind at the present time. And it's not something that we need to fall into despair about, because it's perfectly within the level of our technology to do something about it.
What could they do?
Well, to give you an example, commercial interests are looking right now, and the technology is there, to mine asteroids. We can go to asteroids if the commercial interest is high enough. We can go to them, we can mine them, we can extract minerals, we can bring them back to the Earth. The same technology would allow you to move asteroids or comet fragments. You don't want to blow them up with a nuke. That would be a really bad idea. That would turn one large object into multiple smaller objects, which could cause equally massive devastation and would be very difficult to predict where that devastation was going to fall. What you want to do is to nudge them and move them out of a dangerous orbit into a less dangerous orbit. And the evidence is in the next 30 years we are going to be passing through dangerous filaments of the Taurid meteor stream. And if we were smart, we would be devoting some resources to protecting our cosmic environment, just as there are many issues that we need to devote resources to. Unfortunately, the one that's most attractive to our politicians at the moment is warfare. We devote limitless resources to technologies of mass destruction. There really is no end to the amount that we're prepared to spend on that in terms of our so-called security. We feel somehow we're making ourselves more secure by having these incredible weapons and spending trillions of dollars on them. But the cosmos doesn't give a fuck about any of that. The cosmos is out there with these giant objects, which have a far greater explosive power than all the nuclear weapons stored on Earth at the present time. The comet Shoemaker-Levy 9, which hit Jupiter in 1994, had a total calculated explosive power of 300 gigatons. If you took the entire nuclear arsenal of the world today and blew it all up at once, it would yield 6.4 gigatons. So these objects are producing catastrophic results on a scale that far beyond anything that we ourselves could do with nuclear weapons. It's time we spent a bit less time and money on weapons of mass destruction and a bit more on looking after this beautiful garden that we call the Earth, and that is our home, and it will be the home of our children and our children's children. I'm a grandfather now. I feel passionately about this. We need to look after this planet. It's our responsibility as a human species to do so, and one of the challenges, it's not the only challenge, there are many other challenges. One of the challenges is to pay attention to our cosmic environment and to realize that the cosmos can intervene cataclysmically in the human story, and that the Taurid meteor stream in particular may have been a hidden hand in human history, that there may have been other impacts in the last 13,000 years that have affected and changed the course of humanity on this Earth. And the ancients were very good at paying attention to the sky. We ourselves have amazing tech to study the sky, but for some reason we're ignoring this problem of cosmic impacts. And that's incredibly irresponsible because, as I said a moment ago, it is a solvable problem. It is within the limits of our technology. It would require a global cooperative effort to sweep our cosmic environment clean, but it could be done. And a side product of that global cooperation might be a friendlier, more nurturing, more loving, more positive human community.
It is very odd that we have this infantile nature, even as grown adults and world leaders, that we do like to ignore imminent danger as long as it hasn't affected us in the past. There's no real moment we can point to other than Tunguska in photographic history, modern history, where you could take pictures of things where we had a giant impact.
If I can pause you on that very point, the evidence is compelling that the Tunguska event was an object that fell out of the Taurid meteor stream. That happened at the peak of the Beta Taurids in June 1908. It is extremely likely that Tunguska object came from the Taurid meteor stream, because we were passing through the Taurid meteor stream at exactly that time. And what the Tunguska object is estimated to be between 60 and 190 meters in diameter. So it's not a very big object. It's not a kilometer scale object. It's big, but it's not that big. It doesn't even hit the Earth. It's an airburst. It explodes in the sky above, fortunately, an uninhabited area of Siberia. But the devastation is huge. It wasn't even noticed for some years afterwards until scientific teams went in and studied the area and discovered that 80 million trees across 2,000 square kilometers had been completely flattened by that airburst. And to put that in context, 2,000 square kilometers is the size of London. So anybody who knows London is aware that there's a ring road around London called the M25. If that airburst had taken place over central London, everything of London out as far as the M25 would have been gone completely.
Is that what it looks like today?
Pretty close. It says like 100 years later, there's still no trees.
Yeah. and if you look above there, you're looking at the black and whites that were taken in the early 1900s.
Oh my God! Yeah.
Which revealed the extent of this damage. So it's just stupid of us not to pay a bit more attention to this, especially when we have the tech to actually do something about it.
We have that nature though when it comes to climate change.
There's a curious denial.
Yeah.
There's a denial of the role of cataclysms in the human story. And there is even a word for that in science, and it's called uniformitarianism. And this is a particular philosophy of science where the view is that everything as we see it in the world today is how things have always been. So if we don't see cataclysms today and they're not playing a major part in our story today, then there weren't cataclysms and they didn't play a major part in our story in the past. That's why, although it's before the time of human beings, when the evidence that the dinosaurs were made extinct by a comet or an asteroid first came out, Lewis and Walter Alvarez, the father-son team who were behind that science, were ridiculed by their colleagues. And they were told it's absolutely absurd. Of course, no cosmic event could have made the dinosaurs extinct. They spent 10 years taking that ridicule until they found the crater in the Gulf of Mexico. Since then, the whole scientific community has accepted that the course of life on this planet was radically changed by a cosmic impact. And, I like to joke about it, but it was a cosmic impact that was big enough, literally, to turn dinosaurs into chickens, because that's what's left of the dinosaur line is, the birds. And at the same time, skulking in those primeval forests is this little mammal, and it looks a bit like a shrew, 65 million years ago, going nowhere. The dinosaurs rule the earth. Then the cosmos intervenes. The dinosaurs are swept out of the way. And what happens? The mammals start to evolve very rapidly. And they start to occupy niches that were previously closed to them. And the bottom line is, we would not be here. The human species would not be here. We would not be having this conversation if the dinosaurs had not been made extinct 65 million years ago. So these are world-changing events, and my argument is that such a world-changing event occurred between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago, and it's high time we paid more attention to it.
So my final point is the falsifiability one. That is, what would it take to refute your hypothesis? Like, for me, the answer would be, like, if Göbekli turned out to be what you think it might have been, the place where advanced ancient civilization once inhabited, or they used it, where are the metal tools? Where are the writing, the examples of writing?
Perhaps a decision was made not to use metal. Perhaps a decision was made that errors had taken place, that in reinventing civilization we shouldn't perhaps go down quite the same route as before. Perhaps writing isn't always an advance. Perhaps an oral tradition which records in memory, which enhances and uses the power of memory, may be a very effective way of dealing with information. We regard writing as an advance, and I can see lots of reasons why it is an advance, but if we put ourselves into the heads of ancient peoples, maybe it wasn't. I mean, there's a tradition from ancient Egypt that the god Thoth, god of wisdom, was the inventor of writing, but we have a text in which he is questioned by a pharaoh who is saying, well, actually, have you really done a good thing by introducing writing? Because then the words may roam around the world without wise advice to put them into context, and what will happen to memory when people so there might be a choice not to go that way.
All right, but then what do you mean by advance? When you say there used to be a lost advanced civilization before 10,000 years ago.
Well, let's just pause here for a second, because what we know for a fact is that the carbon dating in all the area around Göbekli Tepe is somewhere around 12,000 years. Is that correct?
11,600 years ago is
so
the earliest they found so far, but a great deal of Göbekli Tepe is still underground.
Right. So at least what we know is someone built some pretty impressive structures 11,600 years ago.
7,000 years before Stonehenge.
So when that story broke, this is long before you came along with your book, it was controversial in the sense that we thought hunter-gatherers could not do something like this because to do that you need a large population with a division of labor and so forth. And so what the response to archaeologists was, well, I guess we were wrong about hunter-gatherers. Maybe they can do more stuff than we gave them credit for. So why is that not a reasonable hypothesis versus it was actually advanced, but we mean something completely different by advanced, not writing and metal and technology. We mean, I don't know what you mean. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, we have a body of archaeology which goes on for decades, which is saying that megalithic sites, for example, Gigantea in Malta or Hagarim or Manidra, megalithic sites date to no older than 5,500 to 6,000 years old. Gigantea would push it close to 6,000 years old. And there are no older sites than that, and therefore the megalithic site is associated with a certain stage of Neolithic development. Then along comes Göbekli Tepe, 7,000 years older than Stonehenge. Incredibly sophisticated site, very large scale. I mean, Klaus Schmidt, sadly, he's passed away. I spent 3 days working the site with him. He was very generous to me. He showed me a lot. He talked to me a lot. And he said basically 50 times as much as they've already excavated is still under the ground, that there's hundreds and hundreds of giant stone pillars that they've identified with ground-penetrating radar. He's not even sure if they're ever going to excavate them. But by all accounts, we are looking, if we take what's still under the ground into account, we're looking at the largest megalithic site that's ever been created on Earth. And it pops up 11,600 years ago with no obvious background to it. It just comes out of nowhere. Now, to me, that's rather that we know of. But to me, that's immediately a rather puzzling and an interesting situation. And I would be remiss as an author and an inquirer into these matters if I didn't take great interest in that. The sudden appearance, 7,000 years before Stonehenge, of a megalithic site that dwarfs Stonehenge, to me, that's a mystery, and it's really worth inquiring into.
To put it into perspective, that's more than 2,000 years older than what we now consider to be the building of the Great Pyramid of Giza in comparison to us to then. So between our time now in 2017 and the construction of the Great Pyramid, you're talking about 2,000 years earlier than that. I mean, that is unbelievable when you're talking about 7,000 years before what we thought people were doing.
Okay, but my point was that instead of, before we go down the road of constructing a lost civilization that was super advanced but different from our idea of advance, why not just attribute to these fully modern hunter-gatherers who had the same size brains we have and so on, that they were able to figure out and do this? We just underestimated their abilities.
But why did archaeologists tell us for so long hunter-gatherers couldn't do it, and we needed agricultural populations that could generate surpluses that could pay for the specialists
that was the theory. But that was so now what archaeologists are saying was, I guess we were wrong about hunter-gatherers.
Well, they might be wrong about hunter-gatherers, or there might be another civilization that they had not discovered that has been unearthed by time.
Okay, but that's, but
Sorry,
we're talking
Michael.
about so much time.
Lost civilizations are not such an extraordinary idea. I mean, nobody knew that the Indus Valley civilization existed at all until some railway work was done around Mohenjo-daro in 1923. Suddenly, a whole civilization pops up out of the woodwork that's just never been taken into account before the 1920s. We still can't read its script. You know, the idea that we come across that another turn of the spade reveals information that causes us to reconsider not just was it hunter-gatherers or agriculturalists, but perhaps something bigger than this is involved.
Or in between that.
That's not such an extraordinary idea. I get it that mainstream archaeology doesn't want to go there, but that's my job to go there.
I don't think that's correct. They would be happy to go there if there's evidence for it. By what you just said, they now fully accept the Indus Valley civilizations. How did that happen if they were dogmatically closed-minded?
I don't say that they were dogmatically closed-minded about that. The evidence, the massive amount of evidence that came up with the discovery of Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Dholavira, and other such sites, it's very difficult. You have to be completely stupid to say that that's not a civilization. Göbekli Tepe is a bit more nuanced. You know, we have stone circles. We have some interesting astronomical alignments. The world's first perfectly north-south aligned building.
Maybe.
No, definitely.
Again, that's a patternicity thing.
Well, I'm citing Klaus Schmidt.
Well, that's all right. But any of us who read back into history 10,000 years ago, what we're thinking, that they might have been thinking, that's always dangerous for anybody, not just you, all of us.
That's a good point. Who is Klaus Schmidt?
Klaus Schmidt was the original excavator of Göbekli Tepe. He was the head of the German Archaeological Institute, DIG, at Göbekli Tepe. He kindly spent 3 days showing me around the site. And really nobody's disputing the astronomical alignments of Göbekli Tepe. They weren't particularly interesting to Klaus Schmidt, but they're there.
And what is the alignment? Like, how is it established?
Well, when you have a perfectly north-south aligned structure, perfectly north-south, to true north, not magnetic north, then you are dealing with astronomy by definition. And there are other alignments of the stone circles.
True north as established today, or with the precession of the equinoxes?
True north is always
about
true
12?
north.
Okay.
It's the rotation axis of our planet.
Okay, so it to this day, it points exactly in the same place where it was pointing.
It always points to true north. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But back to this, they don't want to go. Sure, they want to go there. They would be happy to go there. Case in point, 2 weeks ago in the journal Nature, the most prestigious scientific journal in the world, there was published an article that humans, or maybe Neanderthals, lived in San Diego area 130,000 years ago. This is an order of magnitude older than the Clovis dates.
This was the
13,000.
mastodon bones they found that were
Mastodon
smashed.
bones, yes.
They believe.
So here's an example of how, clearly there's not some conspiracy to keep alternative people or fringe or radical theories out. It was published in peer-reviewed, the most prestigious journal in the world. There it is. 2
And
weeks
then
ago.
what happened?
Well,
hasn't there been a massive reaction to that, and lots of scathing remarks by other academics?
Yes, but that's normal. That's how science works.
Yeah.
You get pushed back. You got to have a thick skin. It's just the way it goes.
You've got to have a thick skin. That's for sure. But maybe sometimes your skin is so thick that you just can't sense anything around you.
Well, of course, we don't want that either.
So what do you think is going on when you look at something like Göbekli Tepe that's covered up purposefully, right?
Yes, deliberately buried. Again, I cite Klaus Schmidt. He's the authority on this. He's the excavator. He absolutely adamantly insists that site was deliberately buried and finally covered with a hill, which is what Göbekli Tepe means in the Turkish language, pot-bellied hill.
Yeah.
And you're talking about something. Give me the perspective of how large they believe it is currently, as of current.
What's excavated at the moment is on a scale of Stonehenge. What's under the ground may be as much as 50 times larger.
Jesus.
But at Göbekli Tepe, no one lived there. There's no tools. There's no.
Well, you're talking about 12,000 years old, though.
But if it's buried, there should be pottery. There's no pottery, no writing, no articles of clothing. No one lived there.
Well, you're saying nobody lived there, so why should they have pottery? Why should pottery be in the fill? Why would they go along and break some pots and stick it in the artificial
fill? How
fill?
about something? They're trash something that would indicate it's a different kind of people than what we're used to seeing in the archaeological record.
Well,
in other words,
it's just rubbish that they poured in. It's just stones and earth, buckets of it.
In other words, Graham, for you to gain support for your theory amongst mainstream archaeologists, they want to see positive evidence to overturn the old theory. In other words, the burden of proof is on the person challenging the mainstream.
I completely agree.
In every field.
But isn't there some proof that the mainstream idea of these hunters and gatherers never had anything in what the theory was that would indicate these people were capable of building something even remotely the size of Göbekli Tepe?
Yeah, to me, that's the stunning beauty of this find. It overturns our ideas of primitive hunter-gatherers that could not do this. Apparently they can.
That's one possible assessment.
That's right. So this, I call this, somebody else calls it, the bigotry of low expectations. You know, it's like we had this kind of low expectations for these hunter-gatherers. Maybe we should jettison that idea. And in my own other field of the history of religion, it also threw that off because this apparently was a kind of a spiritual, religious. That's the wrong word. They wouldn't have used.
Actually, nobody can know that.
That's right. So, but if it was, this is the big National Geographic article emphasized that maybe this is the very first religious spiritual temple ever built because they didn't live there, so they went there for a reason.
Isn't it also possible that this is signs that civilization was more advanced 12,000 years ago than we thought?
Okay, more advanced. What do we mean by advanced?
We're talking about the ability to construct an amazing structure.
Well, okay.
How big was it? Like, how tall are these stone?
Some of them are 20 feet tall.
Yeah, but
some of them are smaller with astronomical alignments. Klaus Schmidt called it a center of innovation. He was intrigued by the way that agriculture emerges around Göbekli Tepe at the same time that Göbekli Tepe is created. I mean, he went on record with me, perhaps he's not right, but he went on record with me as saying that was the first agriculture. These were the people who invented agriculture. Now, to me, the notion that a group of hunter-gatherers wake up one morning and invent megalithic architecture, the world's largest megalithic site, and at the same moment invent agriculture, stretches credulity a bit. And I think I would prefer to propose, and I have proposed, that what we're looking at is evidence of some kind of transfer of technology, that people came into that area who had other knowledge, and that was applied, and perhaps they mobilized the local population around this site. Perhaps that's precisely why we see agriculture developing there. So perhaps that's the skill that's being passed on.
But I don't see anything particularly... Okay, the stone work is spectacular, but that's not any more advanced than a few millennium afterwards.
But you're talking about something 20 feet tall, made of stone,
but we know
by people that were hunter-gatherers?
But a couple hundred people can move multi-ton stones.
There's no mystery in moving the stones. They're still moving 20-ton stones in Indonesia today. I mean, megalithic cultures still exist.
You also know that the carving on the outside is extremely complex. It's three-dimensional carving.
Okay, but I mean,
but you know that means.
But
do you know what that means?
But Lascaux at 30,000 years ago has magnificent cave paintings with three-dimensional animals.
But that's painting. You know hold on a second.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying when I say three-dimensional carvings?
Yeah, like the Venus.
No, the carvings were on the outside, meaning they didn't carve them into the rock. They carved away the rock around them, which is pretty sophisticated stuff for hunter-gatherers. And they're doing this on these 20-foot tall stone columns. I mean, it's pretty impressive stuff.
Okay, but there the assumption is that they couldn't have figured this out. We know from modern societies where, say, Australian Aborigines, in one generation, they go from stone tools to flying airplanes. The brains are quite capable of doing these amazing things.
Did they go from stone tools to flying airplanes without somebody introducing them to airplanes?
Yeah, you're actually making his argument for him.
No. It's not that much of a reach to carve stone. People have been carving stones for thousands of years.
But the entire archaeological opinion on megalithic sites for decades before this was precisely that it was beyond their ability to do that.
And now the mainstream has changed its mind about this. Or at the very least,
a little shift.
Let's pause for a moment. Let's pause for a moment. So, for sure, we all agree human beings made this.
Yes, not aliens.
Okay.
Even
so
he rejects the aliens.
So the argument is not whether or not aliens made it. The argument is whether or not humans made it that were sophisticated. Well, they're clearly sophisticated enough to make this incredible structure that is some sign of some sort of civilization. I mean,
I believe so. Yeah,
it is. It's a gigantic structure.
I agree with Graham that we've again undersold who these people were. My friend Jared Diamond goes to Papua New Guinea. He talks in the opening chapter of Guns, Germs, and Steel, how smart these people are that live out there in nature and what it takes to survive. He wouldn't last an hour. From L.A., he wouldn't last an hour with his Papua New Guinean friends out there in the wild.
Well, that's because he doesn't know how to survive, and they've been passing down the information for generation after generation.
Very smart. Okay, so it's not a problem of intelligence. And is there okay, so here's the other thing we don't know, is that there might be lots more of these sites, and where there's
there are. I visited one of them, Grahamhancock. You've got the T-shaped pillars sticking out the side of a hill in a farmer's backyard. I mean, I think we're actually at the beginning of opening up this inquiry, not at the end of it by any means.
But then before you, okay, why not just say we don't know? This is a spectacular mystery and leave it at that. Right? Why write a book that says
you guys on
I'm going to fill in all the gaps?
You guys on the mainstream side won't speculate and won't explore. I don't claim to be an archaeologist. I'm not a scientist. I'm an author. It's my job to offer an alternative point of view and to offer a coherently argued alternative point of view. And I must say, gobeklitepe strikes me as a gigantic fucking mystery, and a mystery that is worthy of exploration from a point of view that may not satisfy you.
Oh well, it doesn't. You don't have to satisfy me.
You and your colleagues, and I certainly don't have to satisfy you or them. That's not my project.
But like your opening chapter with Schmidt, I thought I really loved the kind of conversational style you had with Schmidt in the book, where he's dialoguing, where Schmidt goes and look at this, and then he says, but what? Wait, what's that again? Now he's like a little bit like Columbo, like wait, I have just one more question, and the mystery kind of thickens. That's perfectly okay. That's great. I mean, that's what science is all about, is uncovering mysteries that we then have to figure out. So there's always more mysteries, but that doesn't mean that's not positive evidence in favor of a particular theory like a lost civilization. It's just we can't explain this. Full stop.
Yeah. We certainly can't explain it, and you can't explain it by saying that we underestimated hunter and gatherers either.
Well, why not? We know they made it. Whatever you want to call them.
Well, we know humans made it.
That's right. We know humans made it. So whatever you want to call them.
But why do they believe that people were only hunters and gatherers 12,000 years ago? It's because they didn't have any evidence to the contrary.
Right.
This is evidence to the contrary.
I agree.
So you agree that there weren't hunter and gatherers?
Okay, but there's several stages in between. Just 12 people living out in the jungle by themselves versus us. There's like a whole bunch of different.
Well, I would say that Göbekli is a gigantic stage.
Well, we don't. Okay, they didn't live there, so we have to figure out where were they living and what was there. So that has to be excavated.
Well, they only excavated 10% of it, right?
And meanwhile, what you're saying is that we shouldn't speculate at all, because mainstream archaeology is speculating. Mainstream archaeology is speculating when saying it's definitely was hunter-gatherers who did this. That's also a speculation.
That seems more of a reach.
Okay, but not okay. They may be more than hunter-gatherers. They may have been partially settled. You can have any kind of number of states.
But what you can't apparently have is the possibility of a transfer of technology from people who were really masters of that technology already when they came in.
But where are these people? Well,
you're dealing with an
incredible. Where are their homes?
12,000 years ago, their fingerprints are there. Let's find their homes. I don't know that their homes matter. Would their homes even survive after 12,000 years?
Well, homes.
I'm not sure.
They're trash.
But what
they're
survives?
Tools. There's something.
Well, what
Screw trash and tools. We've got Göbekli-Tepe. It confronts us. It challenges the mainstream model. I think it's reasonable to consider the possibility that there was something more than just hunter-gatherers involved here in creating this extraordinary place. Okay. And that's all I've done.
It seems to me that to say hunter-gatherers could build this, wouldn't be opposed to the idea that they're hunting and gathering, but it does certainly imply a lot of leisure time.
Yes.
A lot of leisure time.
Well, we know hunter-gatherers. Oh, sorry.
It's okay. It was like...
Well, again, if we place this back particularly within that climate zone at 11,006 to 12,000, 13,000 years ago, whatever it turns out to be, we're dealing with an extremely demanding and challenging climate, which wouldn't necessarily, to my mind, be conducive to the emergence of a settled culture that would be capable of undertaking a project on this scale. And as somebody who's built a lot of things and moved quite a few heavy weights in my time, I find it the idea sort of perplexing to me that they would be. What I would have to ask is, what is their motive? What is their motive for undertaking a project on this scale? Because it's an enormous project, and to move a 20-ton block of stone is really a challenging task to undertake today. Well, without the infrastructure of large machines and so forth. But to do it by hand, it would be an enormous undertaking. And I, to me, it's like, when are they having time to hunt and gather when you're engaged in a project of this scale?
But we know hunter-gatherers have way more free time than modern society people do. That's the one thing we've learned, is that it's a pretty good way to make a living, actually. They have a better varied diet than we have. This is the Neanderthal diet, right? They have a better varied diet and a lot more free time.
Yeah, but that's within
and a lot less stress.
We knew that all along about hunter-gatherers when
Right.
we were saying they couldn't build megalithic sites.
But we're
So they have
looking
the
at
time.
a
They have the time
time
to do it.
where the environment is undergoing rapid changes to which adaptations would be extremely challenging. And we know those changes are going on all over the planet. We know that sea levels are rapidly rising over a period of a few thousand years, from a sea stand low of about 400 feet up to the present level. We also know that biotas were shifting dramatically all over the planet. The effects of the Younger Dryas were global. Pretty much that is, I think, the emerging consensus now, that both hemispheres, north and south, were being affected by the climate changes of the Younger Dryas. So what we're doing is we're placing this phenomena, this project, within this context of these extremely challenging times in which, adaptation to the environmental changes could easily be the all-consuming challenge of the times. I'm just finding it difficult to imagine a disconnect, to see this disconnect between a project of this magnitude and the motive for doing it during a time when obviously the environment could be posing serious constraints upon people's ability to function in that.
Well, Randall, we don't even know the motives of the Easter Islanders and,
No,
and
we
why
don't.
they raised these huge, but we know they did it.
But isn't that become a central question, though? What something had to have motivated them.
But let's get back to
Clearly,
Göbekli Tepe. So let's just be real clear here. We know there were humans. We know that it's at least 12,000 years old, and we know that the real dispute here, the real question is: did these people have structures and did they have agriculture? We know that they were human beings. They were essentially modern human beings. So were they hunter-gatherers, or did they have structures and
before
agriculture?
Göbekli Tepe, they didn't have structures and they didn't have agriculture.
we
After
know it,
Göbekli
yeah.
Tepe, they did.
So the fact that they were able to build something so monumental, what kind of a leap is it at all to think that these people could figure out how to plant food and figure out how to make a house?
Well, I mean, again, if you look back 30,000 years, 40,000 years to these cave paintings, these are pretty sophisticated.
Yeah,
beautiful.
they are.
Clearly, they had abstract reasoning. They could think from the concrete to the abstract and so on. It's not a big reach to go from that to moving stones around.
I'd say there's a big difference between painting and engraving on
Yeah.
cave walls.
I don't think so. I
And
need to
creating,
see-
To me, the painting is even more
and creating
sophisticated.
the largest megalithic site that's ever been built on Earth.
Wait a minute.
I think there's a huge difference between those two. I mean, nobody would compare the construction effort on Stonehenge or Gigantea with cave paintings. I agree with you. The cave paintings are magnificent. I've had the privilege to visit many of the painted caves. Stunning work. And as Picasso said when he came out of Lascaux, we have invented nothing.
Right.
I mean, they were
Right.
that was that modern human mind, symbolic mind at
Right.
work there. But this is another matter. This is a large-scale construction project that's going on. And it's not just a construction project. It's not like huts. It's hundreds and hundreds of very, very large megalithic pillars, which have to be mobilized, brought to the place. Organizing a workforce in order to do that, even that requires preparation and time and learning and practice. It's not something that you wake up one morning and just can do overnight.
You think that the paintings are more impressive than Göbekli Tepe?
Yeah, or at least comparable.
I think that's absolutely
because
ridiculous.
To convey three-dimensionality on a 2D plane, that's what Picasso meant. It's like, wow, that's incredible. It's like developing perspective, and to use the natural shape of the walls
it's not
to create a three-dimensional perspective look that's pretty abstract.
You're comparing
It is-
apples and pears. It's not a
Yeah.
construction project.
Okay,
it's not. I don't think it's even remotely.
But
I don't think it's even remotely
But
as
what
impressive.
I'm saying is that it doesn't take a huge leap of the imagination to think these people were pretty smart. They had
well, we know
abstract
that they were
reasoning,
smart.
so-
We know what they were smart
No
just
dispute.
because of the fact that those construction projects were done by who? By whoever. We know that they were smart. Whoever built Göbekli Tepe was clearly intelligent. Whoever made those 3D carvings, clearly they were intelligent. But to think that someone drawing on cave paintings is more impressive
Not more
than
impressive,
erecting
just-
20-foot stone columns with three-dimensional carvings on them of a lot of animals that weren't even native to the region.
That's
So- yeah,
that's
that's
not
debatable?
necessarily the case.
Yeah.
Because they could have been
The
extinct
animals were
fossil
native to-
record.
But my point,
native to the
Joe,
region.
is that these paintings are like, say, 30, 40,000 years old to Göbekli Tepe. So there's tens of thousands of years to develop more that we that we're very likely to find more archaeological sites.
And yet, up till now, we haven't found that. We haven't found all of that intermediate material. Which see, if I could actually see that intermediate material between the upper Paleolithic cave art and Göbekli Tepe, if I could see the gradual evolution and development of skills, I wouldn't need to invoke a lost civilization, the survivors of a lost civilization who've mastered those skills elsewhere, to come in and teach those skills at Göbekli Tepe. But it still looks to me like a transfer of technology, unless you can show me that evolutionary process whereby I can understand how this group of hunter-gatherers became equipped to create this giant site, where they practiced, where they learned the skills to move the stones, to organize the workforce, to feed and water the workforce in a rather dry place. All of that is actually quite a logistical challenge.
Yep, and obviously somebody met it somehow.
Some humans.
Yes,
right. So the real question is, did they have structures? Did they have agriculture? Did they have some sort of a community where they lived in an established location?
Like I would imagine.
So that would push back the time where we thought that there was a civilization. That would push them back into a realm of at least stepping out of the hunter-gatherer stage.
Now,
correct?
your guy Schmid, as you show in your book, he did not go as far as you go.
Certainly not.
Right.
No.
But he admitted it's a mystery. Okay, why? That would be the scientific approach. I don't know what it is. Great mystery. Let's just wait and see. Versus, I'm going to postulate a lost civilization. Nothing wrong with that, Graham. It's a free country, and scientists do this all the time, as you've mentioned.
There's a rather humorous thing, which I have to say. Actually, I might even ask Jamie to pull up the couple of images of Fingerprints of the Gods. That's the book I'm best known for. And when I published Fingerprints of the Gods in 1995, essentially I was saying civilization is much older and much more mysterious than we thought. And I was ridiculed for proposing that. 2013, one of the magazines that ridiculed me, New Scientist magazine in Britain, publishes as a cover story picture of Göbekli Tepe and the headline: civilization is much older and much more mysterious than we thought.
Fair enough. Okay, fair enough. And scientists do this. I mean, I've followed paleoanthropology for my whole adult life. And one of the big mysteries is, how did we get a big brain? How did we get to abstract reasoning from say, what chimps can do? No one knows.
The doubling of the human brain size over a period of 2 million years,
and because no one knows, every couple of years there's a new book out. It's climate change. It was
the throwing arm, cooking
that's
food.
That's right, cooking meat. Meat is another big one. A Harvard professor, meat. Okay, and these books come and go, and some of them have legs, some of them don't, and it's just the way it goes.
And then there's Terence McKenna's
It's pretty
theory.
obvious it was psychedelics.
Yeah, that's Terence McKenna's
Not that
stoned
made the
ape
brain
theory.
bigger, but that switched the brain
is this
on.
the old Julian?
Julian Jaynes, no, the bicameral mind, not at all. This is David Lewis Williams, who's professor of anthropology at the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa. His neuropsychological theory of cave art, all kudos to Terence McKenna and Food of the Gods. What a brilliant thinker, what a brilliant alternative thinker. But David Lewis Williams at the University of Witwatersrand had been working on this problem since 1973, and his argument is that the remarkable similarities that we see in rock and cave art all around the world are explained that we're dealing with a shamanistic art. Shamanism involves altered states of consciousness. This is typical visions of altered states of consciousness, and it seems to have accompanied a great leap forward in human behavior.
And you covered this in your book.
I covered it in Supernatural.
Supernatural.
Yeah.
As did Richard Wrangham's theory. This is a highly regarded scientist at Harvard. So he's the meat-eating guy. That it's cooking meat.
Right.
So by cooking the protein, that's what gives you the energy to build a huge brain. All right. So now this guy is starting with 10 pluses on his side. He's Harvard and already respected, and even so, his book was like, maybe.
Well, it's probably a series of different events and a bunch of different factors.
That's right. Could be a number of different things.
There's evidence of just utterly cataclysmic flooding in North America, particularly in the Channel Scablands in the Pacific Northwest. And that flooding came off the ice cap, and something made it come off the ice cap really, really fast. And Randall has just devoted years of his life to studying this mystery, what really went on there. And let's not underestimate it. Let's just not talk about lakes bursting their banks. Let's talk about something huge that took place, and the landscape speaks to that huge event.
And Randall, you've discussed this on the podcast before, but in the interest of making this a standalone show, we should probably get into it before. You came up with this idea at what year was it when that idea first came to your mind? That you remember you were telling me
Yeah.
you were on acid and you were looking at how
that was 1969.
yeah.
And I didn't quite formulate a specific theory at that point.
But you had a thought.
I had an impression. I call it an impression. I was looking at an underfit river. You know what that is?
No.
Jamie, can we do a map? And I'm going to show you exactly what we're talking about here. I'm going to zoom in on. Okay. Well.
Oh, here you go.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
Okay.
Little HDMI action.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. You're going to learn a new term, Joe. It's underfit river. Okay. So it was a little different back in 1969, but Eden Prairie was a location of an airport. Let me put this onto terrain. All right. Here we go. And here we go. So this is the Minnesota River Valley. And I was standing, I actually went back and a few years ago, found the spot I was standing, and it was right here on this bluff, looking into this valley. Now, if you go here, you can see there's another side to it over here. And if you look back here, you're going to see this is what's an underfit river. An underfit river is where the modern river is diminutive relative to the channel that it's flowing in. And the channel was part of what they called the spillway of Lake Agassiz, which was a gigantic meltwater lake that formed in that interval that Graham was just talking about. So this is the modern Minnesota River, which is a fairly substantial river, probably close to the Colorado here that runs through Austin. But you can see the channel. The channel is huge relative to the river. A few geologists have worked on it and concluded that the meltwater flow through here was 4,000 times greater than the modern flow of the Minnesota River. So anyways, I was standing here looking out into this, and what I saw was the modern river entrenched within a couple of banks, and then I'm looking at this huge channel, and I just had this impression that, was this a huge river channel? You know how, because see what I was looking, 3 miles across, there's another set of 200-foot high bluffs matching the ones that I was standing on. And then below me was the modern Minnesota River with its banks, which were like miniature versions of the bluffs. Now, it was a full decade before I actually came back to the idea as I was beginning to learn more about catastrophism, which was still very much in the seminal stages back in the 70s. We've learned so much more about the catastrophic history of this planet since then. But then I began to think, well, and this was before I even knew about Glacial River Warren, it was called, which was the flow through here. And you can actually, Graham, we went there. We
did indeed.
We did. Right up here by Ortonville is Big Stone City. So this is the southern outlet of Lake Agassiz. And this was one of the many outburst floods of gigantic flows of meltwater coming off the ice sheet. Big Stone City. Now, when you look at names of lakes and towns and places, oftentimes there's clues, like Big Stone City and Big Stone Lake. If you go there, there's big stones laying all over the landscape that were flushed out in this catastrophic draining of Lake Agassiz.
Because these drainings would have involved not just water, but icebergs.
Yes.
Turbulent flows of water filled with icebergs the size of oil tankers. And inside those icebergs, locked up, are huge chunks of rock. And eventually the iceberg melts and it releases the rock, and that's how you get the big stone.
Yeah. And then the last place we went, Graham, was the potholes at St. Croix Falls. I'll zoom in here. And this is an interesting place. There's a constriction in the bedrock. This is hard basalt bedrock. Now, when you have water flow coming along, it's got a conservation of volume, so that if you have a narrow part of the channel the water coming in as it's going into that constricted channel speeds up, because if you take measure of the water flow at any 2 points along the channel, it's going to be the same. Whether it's a wide channel with shallower water moving slower or a narrow channel with deeper water moving faster, the discharge through that channel is going to be the same. Well, what happens is if it comes into a constriction, it has to speed up then. When it speeds up, it becomes more erosive. And that's exactly what happened right here at Taylor's Falls. And right here at Interstate Park is a series of gigantic potholes. Now, these potholes are evidence of intense turbulence within swiftly moving deep water. In a minute here, I'll pull up. I've got a great shot. When Graham and I were there, I was in the bottom of one of these potholes, and Graham is peering over the rim. And it's a great shot because you can really get the sense of the scale. I'll pull it up here in a second. But if we go, where did this water come from? This water came from right up here, Lake Nipigon. That was the source of this water. And when you go south of Lake Nipigon, the whole landscape is channel scablands, just like Graham and I were seeing out in Washington. Mm-hmm. And this is very convincing evidence of really catastrophic water flows. And I've always thought it's interesting, or at least for the last decade or so, that if you look at the elevation of the land here, you look at the elevation of the land over here, it's the same. But if you go in the middle here, it's 500 to 1,000 feet lower. What happened here, there was a major discharge south out of Lake Nipigon, came down through.
And I think we should add that Lake Nipigon was discharging because it was filled up with water that came out of the ice cap and filled it up.
Yes.
Yeah. What is the conventional explanation for these massive bluffs that are very far apart from each other with a relatively small river running through the middle of
Try
it?
as I might, I've never found an explanation. Mm-hmm. But you can look here at this. And this is pure what you call scabland, which is the result of major erosional, intense erosion, cutting out. This is a coulee, but
it looks like somebody's just been picking scabs off the skin of the land, and that was these water flows rushing through it, filled with icebergs and whole forests ripped up by their roots. Naturally, it looks like torn up scabs.
And so it's your assertion that this all came out of the cataclysm, that this all came out of the impacts. Comet impacts.
James Teller, a geologist, has dated these flows 12,800 to 12,900 years ago.
And how has he done that?
Radiocarbon dating primarily, by finding if you have a flood and it's picking up anything organic, bone, wood, whatever, and you look in those deposits and you sample, and the samples, let's say because it's a flood, what it's going to do, it's going to pick up younger and older material, because it's washing away, it's excavating other land. And so what you do is you get enough datable material, and if it keeps coming up that the maximum age is a given age, that's probably when the flood happened, or a minimum age rather, not a maximum age. In other words, a flood might pick up stuff that's 15,000 years old and 12,000. Well, when did the flood happen? At 15,000 or 12,000? So what you do is you look for the youngest datable material, and that should usually give you a pretty good idea of when the flood happened. So James Teller has dated this overflow here, and again, it comes out perfectly consistent with the Younger Dryas.
I think it's important to add at that point that there's a reason for all of this, and this is a huge controversy in science at the moment. We know that there was enormous flooding 12,800 years ago, but the question is what caused it? Why did it happen then? And there's a very powerful theory, which is now backed by more than 100 mainstream scientists, that the Earth passed through the debris stream of a disintegrating comet. And that theory is called the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. And those several bits of that disintegrating comet might have been pretty big, maybe up to 1 kilometer in diameter. And they landed on the North American ice cap, generating huge amounts of heat. Tremendous shock wave hits the ice cap, and it turns that ice into water, and it rushes down southwards, fills up these lakes, overflows these lakes, and tears up the landscape underneath it. And this Younger Dryas impact hypothesis is by far, in my view, the best explanation of what's going on. And
I'm very happy to say that the Comet Research Group, the 100 scientists who are behind this, they've been funding their own research for nearly 2 decades because no big mainstream institution would get behind them. But just in the last couple of years, some big funding has come into the Comet Research Group. And they're now in a position to go look at Antarctic ice, to go look at all the evidence from all over the world that shows that this cataclysm did happen 12,800 years ago, and that we're dealing with something really that is almost unimaginable in its scope, and which should change the way that we look at the history of the human species. If it were not for this resistance, I wonder if we could just show a short clip which has got Randall in it, the Randall clip. Which is from the Ancient Apocalypse show, where Randall makes the point at the end of it that once we take this into account, the whole story of history is going to change completely, and that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for some recognition that something really important is missing.
All right, here we go.
Ancient structures, built with surprising sophistication.
It's the most amazing archaeoastronomy site in North America.
Revealing the fingerprints of an advanced prehistoric civilization.
This pillar is like our Rosetta Stone.
The possibility of civilization emerging earlier than we think gets much stronger.
It's going to absolutely demand a rewriting of history as we know it.
Ooh. And this is the point. This is why I've made this series, because that idea has to get out there, that we got to stop being so complacent about how we look at our past. And for the very same reason, we need to stop being so complacent about how we look at our future as well. We live in a hazardous cosmic environment. It just happens that we live at a time in the human story where if we chose to do so, we could actually do something about it.
What motivated you to get involved in this? Like, I know Fingerprints of the Gods you released in the 90s. It was
1995.
That's when I first read it, and I became obsessed. What motivated you to put that out?
It was a process, really. I used to be a current affairs journalist. I was the East Africa correspondent for The Economist. I had no interest in history whatsoever, but I began to come across things, particularly traveling initially in Ethiopia and then in Egypt, which made me wonder about the past. And, standing in front of the Great Pyramid of Egypt is an awe-inspiring experience, especially when you've never seen it before. And in 1989, when I first saw it, I had never seen it before. 6 million tons, 481 foot high, 13-acre footprint, this massive thing. And archaeologists are saying it's just the tomb of a pharaoh, and yet no pharaoh's body was ever found inside it, or indeed inside any ancient Egyptian pyramid. There had to be another explanation. And I've always been a contrarian. I've always tried to give an opposite point of view. I hate it when there's just a single narrative that says this is the truth and there is no other truth. And so I felt it was important to start giving an alternative point of view, and I started to look into it in depth. Could there be something missing from the story of our past? And that's why I ended up writing Fingerprints of the Gods, to put that information before the public, to allow people access to information that they had not had access to before, and to begin to think for themselves instead of just accepting the word of the so-called experts. The experts know a great deal. I couldn't do anything I do without the work that archaeologists do, but they shouldn't be given a monopoly over the story of the human past. Our past belongs to us. It belongs to all of us. And everybody, whether they're an academic or whether they're a man in the street, they've got something to contribute to the idea of our past.
And the Younger Dryas impact theory, when was that first brought out?
2007. That was when it first brought out. It immediately caught my eye. Because when I wrote Fingerprints of the Gods, I proposed that there had been a gigantic global cataclysm about 12,500 years ago. But I didn't really know what had caused it. I suggested a number of possibilities. And then suddenly in 2007, out comes this hypothesis with mainstream backing by mainstream scientists, saying that it looks like there was a series, not just one impact, but multiple impacts all over the Earth around 12,800 years ago that caused
caused this cataclysm. And I began to follow that theory. And by about 2013, it became clear to me that these scientists were onto something really big. And I dived back into it and ended up writing another couple of books, Magicians of the Gods and America Before, which we talked about on your show back in 2019, just to try to put that information out there. And it's fascinating, really, very lazy, the way that archaeologists react to an alternative point of view. In my case, they almost never get to grips with the material that I've put out there in the books. They just say, oh, Hancock, he's a pseudoscientist. He's a fraud. He's a liar. But they never say why I'm a pseudoscientist, why I'm a fraud, or why I'm a liar. They just throw those words out, and you go to Wikipedia, and that's what you see. And the point about Wikipedia is that's the first place, if somebody hears my name or hears about my ideas, first place they're going to go have a look is Wikipedia. And immediately they're going to get turned off. And you can't edit my Wikipedia page. They've locked it, and it's controlled by a group of academics. So I do find this incredibly irritating. But the only thing to do is to keep on going. And this is why, frankly, Joe, your show has been so important, because you're one of the very few people who's allowed this information to get out to the general public, this contrary information which the mainstream doesn't want to hear. You're a powerful platform that's allowed this information to reach so many more people than it otherwise would have reached, and I'm grateful to you for that.
Well, I'm grateful to you guys. I'm really grateful, because this is it's such an exciting notion. It's such an exciting idea, and it makes sense when you look at these incredible structures that we don't really have an explanation for. Mm-hmm. And when we think about the conventional dating of modern history and modern civilization, they want to put it at around 6,000-ish years ago.
That's right. That's right. And then, you know, that was the view really for decades, that civilization began about 6,000 years ago. And before that, there was no such thing as civilization. And they say that the first big megalithic structures were created by societies that were already agricultural societies. So they were generating surpluses, which allowed specialists to have the time to learn how to be architects and engineers and builders. But then suddenly, out of the blue, and we've got an episode on this in the series, comes Göbekli in Turkey, which is 11,600 years old. It's 5,000 years old than the supposed oldest megalithic structures, and it's a fucking enormous megalithic structure, probably the biggest megalithic structure on Earth, because so much of it is still underground, although we know what's there because of ground penetrating radar. Highly sophisticated, 20-ton pillars, beautiful astronomical alignments. Deliberately buried by the people who created it. They ran it for about 1,000 years, and then they deliberately buried it. And archaeology is still struggling to explain this. They've now had to say, well, okay, somehow megalithic architecture began thousands of years before we thought it began. How are we going to explain this? And they have to accept, this is one of the mysteries of Göbekli Tepe, that the archaeology does show this quite clearly, that when the work began on Göbekli Tepe 11,600 years ago, the entire population there were hunter-gatherers. They were not agriculturalists, generating those supposed surpluses that would allow experts in architecture to emerge. They were hunter-gatherers. And how, in God's name, do a group of hunter-gatherers wake up one morning and create something like this enormous scale? And then the mystery deepens, because at the same time that they're building the megalithic site, they're also suddenly doing agriculture. And I look at that as a contrarian. And I say, I actually don't think that this was something that was just dreamed up overnight by a group of hunter-gatherers. I think I'm looking at a transfer of technology. I think people came to that site who already knew how to do this stuff. And maybe they used that site to mobilize the local population, to push them into a new direction. And that was truly the beginnings of civilization as we know it. But I think it was a restarting of civilization, a reboot, not the actual beginnings. I think there was an earlier lost civilization. And that's the whole point of the show I've made.
Why don't you mention about that particular date, 11,600?
Well, it's incredibly important. It's an incredibly important date because the Younger Dryas begins 12,800 years ago with a cataclysm, with a puzzling, mysterious rise in sea level at the same point, 1,000 years of freezing temperatures, mass extinctions of animal species all over the world, and then 11,600 years ago, global temperature shoots up. The last of the ice caps collapse into the sea. Sea level rises enormously. That is the date that work starts at Göbekli Tepe, and that
It's a point I've made many times, but it's really worth making because archaeologists roll their eyes every time you say the word Atlantis. But that is precisely the date that Plato, which is the earliest surviving reference to Atlantis, that's precisely the date he gives for the destruction of Atlantis, 11,600 years before our time. He puts it this way, that his ancestor Solon visited Egypt, and we know about that visit. It's historically recorded. That visit to Egypt was in 600 BC, and there Solon claimed to have been told by Egyptian priests about this great advanced civilization that once existed, but that angered the gods and was destroyed in an enormous flood. And Solon asked those Egyptian priests, when did this happen? And they said, 9,000 years ago. Well, do the math. That's in 600 BC. That's 9,000 years before 600 BC. We call that 9,600 BC. That's 11,600 years ago. That's exactly the date of the end of the Younger Dryas, and it's exactly the date of what is called meltwater pulse 1b, one of the biggest single rises overnight in sea level that ever occurred. So if Plato made it up, it's really weird that he picked a date that is precisely a date that coincides with the latest geological evidence on cataclysmic sea level rise at the end of the Ice Age.
Could be a coincidence, but
a pretty good one.
I will mention I did a two-parter on all of what Graham's just talking about and the geological evidence that confirms or refutes Plato's account, and it's available on my website for download, and it's like 7 hours. 7 hours of detailed
you go deep, bro. You go deep.
And you see, the academics have never bothered to do this because they, in their pride and in their arrogance, they just say, we know that Plato just made it up, that it's just a fantasy. They don't know that. And it's people like Randall coming from the outside who are actually doing the legwork that makes us think about all this again.
And there's plenty of evidence that there were many sites like this that were thought to be just legend and myth, like Troy, for instance. Mm-hmm. That has now been proven to be an actual real city that mimics the initial descriptions of it, the historical descriptions.
We should never dismiss myths. We should always listen to them. They're the memory bank of our species, and they may be expressed in symbolic language. There may be wonderful stories built around them, but at the core is factual information. And what better way to ensure that factual information is passed down to the future than to record it in a fantastic story that people will pass on. People love telling stories, and they don't even need to understand what the heart of the story is. As long as it's a great story, they're going to keep on passing it down to the future. So I think myth is very important, and that's something that we do in my Netflix series, is we look at the myths. The story of Atlantis is not alone. There are thousands of traditions from all around the world speaking of a global flood that destroyed a former civilization, that brought to an end a golden age.
With all this physical evidence and with all these myths, are there more and more people that are accepting this or exploring this with curiosity and open-mindedness now?
I would say yes. And one of the things that makes me confident that that's happening is because I am getting a lot of emails and communications from people, young people going, you know what, I was watching your stuff and Graham's stuff. I've decided I'm going to go into geology. Yeah. I mean, I've gotten dozens. Or I'm going to go into paleontology or archaeoastronomy or archaeology. So just the fact that I'm getting those kinds of communications from people, that's every time I get one, that's encouraging to me. Because I think it's the old axiom that, sometimes, in order to evolve past an entrenched theory, the gatekeepers have to pass away and a new generation has to come along who's a little more willing to look outside that dogmatic framework.
Well, also, if you are a young archaeologist and you're trying to carve your way in the world, what better way than to explore this with tons of evidence that's very controversial theory that's been dismissed.
Takes courage, though. Takes courage on the part of those archaeologists, because they can lose any hope of promotion if they touch ideas like this. Archaeology is a very restrictive discipline. If you don't copy what your professor says, if you go off on a tangent, they'll cut you off. There's so many people who've done such great work in archaeology that doesn't fit with the mainstream, and they just get
isolated by their colleagues.
I'm hopeful. I really am. And one of the things that gives me hope is Brian Murarescu's the reception of his material. That book, The Immortality Key, which is fantastic, which points to
which I wrote the foreword to.
Yes, and you did that podcast with us remotely.
Yeah.
When we did that, and he expressed all this information, we talked about these ancient clay vessels that show clear evidence of some sort of psychedelic that was mixed in with wine that was probably the origins of a lot of the even democracy, a lot like the Enlightenment. A lot of it came from these meetings, and people came from all over the world to participate in these rituals. This is now being widely accepted, and it's a field of study at Harvard.
Yeah, and let's think about it. If you're locked, this is one of the reasons why psychedelics are being so successful in healing people with profound depression. Because what is profound depression otherwise that you're locked in a very narrow frame that you just can't escape from? And what psychedelics seem to do is they break that lock and they allow a kind of openness to come in and new thoughts to come in. So it's not surprising that psychedelics revolutionized the ancient world. And I'm absolutely convinced that there isn't a religion in the world, and this is going to annoy a lot of people, that there isn't a religion in the world that didn't begin with experiences in altered states of consciousness. And when we talk about a lost civilization, I believe that was a civilization that grew out of shamanism and for which altered states of consciousness were fundamental. We've been taught to despise altered states of consciousness in our society today. We're supposed to just be alert problem solvers and not doing anything else. But it's out of altered states of consciousness that the real creativity comes, and that changes in mindset come, and that people can break free from previous restrictions and move in new directions.
I have mentioned to you a friend of mine, Ben Johnson. He's a former Navy SEAL, 11 years as a Navy SEAL, suffering from PTSD, discovered psilocybin mushrooms. This is maybe 12 years ago, 13 years ago, and he began to, a lot of his brothers in arms also were having the same issues with PTSD, discovered that psilocybin mushrooms were a very effective treatment for it. So he began looking into, he became a grower. And he's perfected, and over like 11 or 12 years, he's perfected the growing technique. And he has now been granted the first federal license to legally grow psilocybin. And they're building a laboratory in North Georgia, and it'll probably be where we eventually will get all of our shrooms from. It would be a very interesting discussion for you to talk to him.
I'd love to talk to him.
About what he's got going on. And I've asked, I said, would you ever think about going on Joe's show and talk about what you're doing? He said, I'd love to. A very interesting man. But yeah, 11 years as a Navy SEAL, and he saw it all. And mushrooms is what saved his life. And now he's building a laboratory. He's got funding. He's building a multi-million-dollar laboratory in North Georgia. I've seen his operation. It's mind-blowingly impressive what he's got going on.
Well, that connects us with Dennis McKenna and Terence McKenna's ideas of human beings literally evolving from lower hominids experimenting with psilocybin mushrooms.
It's a very powerful idea, and kudos to Terence McKenna. And I never knew Terence personally, but I do know Dennis very, very well, and he's a fantastic researcher in this field. Kudos to them for realizing it. Terence's book was called Food of the Gods, that the encounters with psychedelics, with ancient psychedelics, were what put humanity on a huge leap forward. And then, unfortunately, we have repressive forces in society that have tried to shut that down and demonize it. But we are missing a very, very important part of our heritage with the attitude that we have to psychedelics right now. And that's why I'm so happy to see that mainstream research is finally getting involved in this. They're realizing that these are real healing vehicles, that they can do things that no other big pharma medicine can do. My only concern is that big pharma takes it over, and that they start putting in, synthetic psilocybin and patenting it in various ways. This again, it's like our past. This is a birthright of all humanity, which we should have a right to. Governments should not have a right to tell
adults what they may or may not put in their bodies. Governments should not have that right to hold the keys to our consciousness. These should be matters of personal decision. And for the same reason, looking into the issue of a lost civilization, we should not look for ourselves in the past. We should not look for 21st century civilization with all its particular kinds of tech and all its attitudes. We should be open to something very different in the past, which was nevertheless capable of doing extraordinary things.
Is there any evidence that the ancient Egyptians utilized psychedelics?
Definitely. The ancient Egyptians definitely used psychedelics. There are works of art. Their psychedelic of choice was the blue water lily, which was tinctured in wine. And bottles of this were found in the tomb of Tutankhamun, as a matter of fact. And apparently, I've not experienced blue water lily myself, but apparently it induces a deeply altered state of consciousness and opens up visions and possibilities. We shouldn't despise these things.
Do we know what the psychedelic compound in blue water lily is?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it is. It's all I know is that it induces a dreamlike visionary state.
So we know for a fact that they utilized this based on...
Yes, we do. Based on those bottles that were found in Tutankhamun's tomb.
Here it is. Blue water lilies hold the key to stunning different high.
Yeah.
Besides being stunningly beautiful, the blue water lily has some surprising medicinal qualities, ranging from being an aphrodisiac to alleviating pain, depression, to even upset stomachs. The blue water lily also has a dark underbelly. It's got psychedelic properties that can catapult you into a super high. How's that dark? Also called...
Well, that's the propaganda again.
Yeah.
You see.
The blue lotus, the blue water lily, is believed to have originated in Egypt's Nile River and was used by ancient Egyptians as a sacred substance to attain higher levels of consciousness. In fact, it's common to find symbols representing the blue lotus in Egyptian pillars and scrolls.
And that's a fact. It's all over ancient Egyptian art. And the Egyptologists will tell you that they're holding those just to sniff the perfume. No, they're not. They're venerating them for their effects on consciousness. And to which we should add that the ancient Egyptian tree of life was an acacia tree. And its bark contains dimethyltryptamine, the most powerful hallucinogen known to man. I don't like the word hallucinogen, but that's the one we have to use. Entheogen, whatever we want to say. The most powerful known to science. And again, fortunately, there is now very interesting research going on into these things. So there are so many forbidden areas of our past which have been forbidden by the experts, by the so-called authorities, which gradually, in the new mindset of the 21st century, we are breaking through to. I think what's special about our time, and by goodness, it's a time of turbulence and a time of difficulty. We are living through a paradigm shift. And that paradigm shift has to do with our attitude to so-called experts. Yes, there is a place for experts. Of course there is. But they shouldn't be given sole control over any area of the human story. And what's happening now is that people distrust experts, and they rightly and properly distrust experts, because again and again the experts have misled us. And this is true with psychedelics, and it's true with the study of the ancient past of the human species as well. It's absurd that a small group of academics called archaeologists should literally hold the keys to the whole human past and tell us, lecture us, instruct us on how human beings were in the past. There's so much more room for deep exploration on this, and for people who aren't academically qualified to roll their sleeves up and get some work done. And Randall is a prime example of that. A man who doesn't come from the field, the background of geology or archaeology, but you've rolled up your sleeves, you've walked the walk. They're still rolled up right now. and you've got up there and you've brought new information to the table. And that's one of the things I'd like to say, that everybody can do this. This is our past, our heritage. It should not be controlled by a tiny specialist group.
We had dinner together in London, and you were speaking about research that's being done on dimethyltryptamine.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Well, that's happening at Imperial College, and I recently attended an event just a few weeks ago with several of the volunteers in that project. And what's happening is they are legally being given DMT at Imperial College, which is one of the leading research institutes in the UK. And for the first time ever, they're not looking to find out what are the possible therapeutic outcomes of this. They're actually looking at the experience itself. It's very well known, anybody who's used DMT, I've used DMT multiple times, is going to have entity encounters. They're going to meet entities who may sometimes look very weird. They may be part animal, part human in form. They may be almost formless, but yet they speak to you, they communicate with you. And of course, the mainstream attitude, this is just rubbish, this is just your brain on drugs. Well, Imperial College, they're now testing that view. And what they're finding is that and something else, DMT, as I'm sure you know, Joe, is a very short-acting experience when you smoke it. It's about 12 minutes, maybe less. You're in there, you're plunged into a completely convincing, sometimes terrifying parallel reality. It's so confusing, you hardly know what's going on, and then you're out again. But you come out with a feeling that something's been downloaded to you. In Imperial College, they found a way to keep people in the peak state of DMT for an hour. They're delivering it through drip, through timed release, and they're keeping the volunteers in an hour in that state. So they have time to find their way around the DMT realm that they find themselves in. And the astonishing thing is that these volunteers, both men and women, are all coming back with accounts of meeting the same entities and the same world. And it has to raise the question, and I know Rick Strassman has been on your show. And kudos to Rick Strassman, because he was really the first scientist to work with DMT and human volunteers at the University of New Mexico. Rick Strassman is open to the idea that what happens with DMT is that it alters the receiver wavelength of the brain, and that it allows us to gain access to other realities, that these encounters are not unreal, that they're real, but they're real on a level that we can't experience in a day-to-day state of consciousness. We have to be in an altered state of consciousness in order to experience them. And ultimately, the aim of this project is to map the DMT realm. You know, we talk a lot about extraterrestrials and ETs and making contact, and I'm sure the universe is filled with life, and it would be a very good thing to have the tech to make contact, or perhaps not a good thing, with all those other life forms in the universe. But right there in the DMT experience, inside our own heads, we have the opportunity to encounter another world, another realm, entities who are very different from ourselves and who have teachings to give us. And I think we should be spending a lot more research funds on exploring those experiences and finding out what's going on, rather than zooming off to other planets. Let's do both, but let's make sure that we understand that consciousness is an enormous mystery, and at the level of consciousness, DMT opens up literally a parallel world. And there's a nexus here with quantum physics, and with the notion of parallel realms and parallel realities. Maybe we can actually access them. Well, the work at Imperial College ultimately is going to come up with some answers on that.
And so much more cost effective.
So much more cost effective.
Traveling to other galaxies.
Yeah. I mean, let's do that first.
Yeah.
Let's understand what we are. Let's understand what our consciousness is. Let's not just keep locked in this, we're here to produce, we're here to consume, we're here to buy cars. Sure, we're here, those are all part of our life today, but it's not all of us. We're much more mysterious, much deeper creatures than that. And psychedelics offer a doorway into another way of exploring human consciousness. And when we do that, we find that there are unseen realities all around us that can be made visible in a deeply altered state of consciousness. And yes, in terms of research funds, it's so much cheaper than trying to, fly off to Mars or wherever. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. I'm just saying that if we're going to do that, we need to explore the mystery of consciousness. And if we're going to if we're seriously going to engage with the ET abduction phenomenon, with extraterrestrial, so-called extraterrestrials encounters, we must recognize that fundamental to this is consciousness. It's not just physical contact. There's consciousness is involved. I wrote a book back in 2005 called Supernatural Meetings with the Ancient Teachers of Mankind. And it is astonishing, Joe, how encounters that were described as encounters with elves and fairies in the Middle Ages, encounters that shamans to this day describe as encounters with spirits, that all the characteristics of those encounters apply to encounters with so-called extraterrestrials today. It's as though in each in each generation, each civilization, we construe experiences according to our cultural background. So they called them fairies and elves in the Middle Ages. Shamans called them spirits. We call them ETs today. But if we're really going to crack this problem, and it is a problem, and it is a mystery, I'm not dismissing it, it's a very important mystery. If we're going to crack it, we're going to have to use psychedelics to explore the mysteries of consciousness.
Yeah, I'm very excited that the attitudes about this stuff from the general public, people are much more open-minded now than ever before.
Yeah.
I mean, ever in my lifetime. I remember discussing with people doing DMT in the early 2000s, and people are like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah, exactly.
What, are you crazy?
Exactly.
And now almost everybody and their cousin has a story about, trying ayahuasca or doing psilocybin or having some sort of an experience with peyote.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very widespread, and I would say it's part of an overall change in our society, which is extremely healthy, which is the change of just accepting what the experts tell us. Oh, a scientist said this, so it must be true. We're starting to think for ourselves, and we're not willing any longer to be told what to think. We're wanting to find out for ourselves, and that attitude has very much affected the way that people relate to psychedelics. And when people explore the psychedelic experience in a responsible way, and psychedelics are very serious business. You and I both know this. They're very, very serious business. I would not encourage children to take psychedelics. But actually, if we want to keep children away from psychedelics, it would be far better to make them legal than leave them illegal and available on the black market. I think it's something for the mature mind. But I regard it as a fundamental human right of adults to be able to explore our unconsciousness so long as we do no harm to others. And I see this attitude spreading much more widely in society. What the hell is that guy in a suit? What right has he got to tell me how I treat my own health or how I treat my own consciousness? So long as I do no harm to others, that is entirely my business and nobody else's.
Agreed. And if this is the source of civilization, or one of the reasons why people were able to think so creatively and create these incredible structures thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, this all does coincide with this work about these apocalyptic scenarios that you guys are talking about, because if we don't have an understanding of how we got to where we were, and we also don't have an understanding that this can happen to us again, it's very possible for us to happen again.
It's indeed possible for it to happen again. And in the 8th episode of Ancient Apocalypse, one of the scientists from the Comet Research Group makes that point, that the comet that disintegrated, that caused so much damage on Earth 12,800 years ago, its debris stream is still in orbit. The Earth passes through it twice a year, and in the next 30 years we're going to be passing through a very lumpy bit of this 30 million kilometer wide debris stream that's called the Taurid meteor stream. We should be paying much more attention to that, because it's not doom and gloom, because we can do something about it should we choose to do so. And let's stop focusing all our efforts on fighting one another and hating one another and filling the world with anger and fury. And let's work together as a human species to make life on this planet better for everybody. That's what's going on now. There's a new mindset which is coming into force. And I celebrate the youth of our society today, because they are refusing to be bound by the orders that are given to them by the powers that be. There's a new spirit of thinking for ourselves, and that new spirit is, in my view, going to change everything. It seems like a dark time right now. A lot of stuff is going on. That's always the case when you're in the middle of a paradigm shift. It seems like a dark time, but we're privileged to live at this time, because 200-300 years from now, this time is going to be looked back on as a turning point in the human story.
We might mention that, speaking of the Taurid meteor shower, we are passing through the Taurid meteor stream right now as we speak.
As we speak, yeah.
Late October to about the second week in November, up till about the 15th or 17th of November, Earth is passing through that stream. And it probably is the most important meteor stream in terms of the history of recent life on this planet. And this goes, to people like Bill Napier and Tube and all of those guys who've...
Major astronomers are very aware of this, and it's almost like something is trying to shut them down and stop the word getting out there. Yes, NASA has a search for near-Earth asteroids, but weirdly they're not paying any attention to the Taurid meteor stream. We know that there's 200 objects in the Taurid meteor stream that are a kilometer or more in diameter. Comet Enki, which is at the heart of the stream, is almost 5 kilometers in diameter. It's all part of these are all fragments of that original giant comet that began to disintegrate 12,800 years ago, and that the Earth ran into.
So is this? What are you showing me, Jimmy?
This is a video on Twitter of the Taurid meteor stream.
It's a great time to see shooting stars.
Fireball pop up.
Yeah,
bam.
There they go. That's exactly what happens. We're in that time period now, and fortunately, most of those fireballs are caused by little objects, maybe the size of your fist, maybe just the size of a fingertip, maybe just a speck of dust burning up into the atmosphere, but they are shrouding very large objects that are on that same orbital trajectory which the Earth crosses twice a year. And we should be paying attention to those large objects because we can actually do something about them. And the evidence shows that they did something terrible to the Earth 12,800 years ago. And they changed everything.
And that is what this Netflix series is all about.
That's what Ancient Apocalypse is all about. It's why it's called Ancient Apocalypse, because that's what it ultimately comes down to. Now, there's masses of material in the series about the possibility of a lost civilization and presenting the evidence for a lost civilization. But ultimately, when you talk of a lost civilization, how did it become lost? What happened that took it away, that obliterated it from human memory? And this apocalyptic episode called The Younger Dryas is the answer to that. The point I often make, which I think is worth making again and again, is how different the world was during the Ice Age. Mm-hmm. The Sahara Desert was green. It was a fertile place. Nobody's doing much archaeology in the Sahara Desert today. The Amazon rainforest, 5 million plus square kilometers under deep canopy. Hardly any archaeology is being done there, and yet we know from LiDAR surveys that there are enormous structures under that canopy. And then what about sea level rise? 400 feet sea level rise at the end of the Ice Age. The prime real estate on Earth, 27 million square kilometers. It's about 10 million square miles. Were submerged by rising sea levels at the end of the Ice Age. And again, archaeology, there is marine archaeology, but they're not really looking very closely at that. I wonder, Jamie, would it be possible to pull up the diving clip?
Is this from Japan?
No, this one's actually from Bimini. We have an episode on Bimini and on the very controversial structure called the Bimini Road.
Oh, right.
And this is just a little clip from that.
My suspicion is humans are a species with amnesia. We have forgotten something incredibly important in our own past. And I think that incredibly important forgotten thing is a lost advanced civilization of the Ice Age.
I've spent decades searching for proof of this lost civilization at sites around the globe.
Oh, wow.
Now, my aim is to piece together these clues.
And that seems extremely strange.
To show you evidence that challenges the traditional view of human history.
You see
the Bimini Road.
The Bimini Road is not even very deep. It's only about 20 feet deep. It was one of the last things to be covered by Ice Age sea level rise, and that's why we show a reconstruction of it above water. It's made of extremely regular blocks, megalithic blocks, on a very large scale, more than 1,000 feet in length. When you dive on it, and I've dived on it multiple times, and I went back to diving in order to dive on it again in this series. It's impossible to believe that it's entirely a work of nature. And I took a marine biologist there with me who's dived all over the world, and he agreed with me that there's just no way that this thing can be explained as a totally natural phenomenon.
Can we see it, Jamie? And what is the conventional reasoning for this?
The conventional reasoning is that it's just beach rock, fractured into natural patterns. But when you get there and get underneath those rocks, you see that they're propped up, they're leveled out with rocks underneath them, that the whole thing is
been very carefully structured by human beings. And the point is, and another point I'd like to make is Bimini today is a tiny, tiny island. But Bimini during the Ice Age was part of an enormous island. The whole Grand Bahama Bank was above water, an enormous island. And weirdly, that island turns up on an ancient map. It turns up, that's not the Bimini Road. But that is on the left. That's the Bimini Road. You got the cursor on there. Yeah, those are shots of the Bimini Road.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that these uniform stones occurred naturally. And
Yeah.
how long is this?
About 1,000 feet in length. And it's not just a straight line. It's got a J-shaped curve at one end of it as well. And we know that it's been underwater for about 6,000 or 7,000 years, but the question is, how long before that was it made? How long did it stand there above water at a very prominent point on this ancient island that we now call the Grand Bahama Banks? And one of the mysteries I look into is that on an ancient map, the famous Piri Reis map drawn by a Turkish admiral in 1513, that Grand Bahama Banks as an above-water island is shown. It is featured on the Piri Reis map. And what do you see running down it but an image of the Bimini Road above water? Now, how could Piri Reis, who drew his map in 1513, have known this? He tells us the answer, that he based his map on more than 20 older source maps, all of which are now lost. And he suggests that those maps had come out of the famous Library of Alexandria and that they'd been taken to Constantinople, and that's where he got access to them. Somebody, I believe, was mapping the world, was exploring the earth during the Ice Age, and left us ancient maps that show features that only existed during the Ice Age.